Noon. The kitchen had slaughtered a pig and 2 sheep. This surprised the idle porters even more, and they all felt it was a farewell meal. Although they ate heartily, they felt a deep sense of sadness. Their eyes were filled with reluctance. At this moment, Jian Wushuang and Wang Luan stood on the 2nd floor, watching the scene. "It's about time. Announce it after the meal," Jian Wushuang said. Wang Luan nodded and replied, "Your method is indeed effective. After 2 days of waiting, they'll realize how good this meal is." This was similar to dealing with the iron-faced Liang Chun. If these porters were asked to join the rebel army right from the start, hardly anyone would have agreed. After all, exerting effort was better than risking their lives. Moreover, these past few days they had eaten well, drunk well, and earned twice as much money as before. They were already imagining a bright future. But now, suddenly losing their livelihood, combined with the rich food they had recently eaten, made it hard for them to return to eating coarse grains. At this time, if they were asked to join the army with double the pay, they would have no choice but to agree. Jian Wushuang had already prepared 1,000 taels of silver. He didn't stop there. Since he wanted to expand, he would expand to the fullest. Weapons couldn't rely on looting. They had to be self-produced. For instance, bows, horses, and forging swords could all be done in Xianxia town. He had already taken over some blacksmith shops in the town. All of this had started after the departure of iron-faced Liang Chun. The blacksmiths had secure jobs and didn't need to take risks with them, lest they be held accountable later. Jian Wushuang didn't have time to waste words with these people, so he used coercion. He directly had their wives and children held. Either they worked together or they sank together. Of course, all this was done in secret. Outsiders couldn't know, and iron-faced Liang Chun definitely couldn't know. Although these people were innocent, as long as they worked hard, Jian Wushuang would still pay them. They had looted the silver warehouse and Chun Mozi's family wealth. They obtained over 10,000 taels of silver and several hundred taels of gold, plus the supplies and gold and silver looted from merchant ships. Now, Jian Wushuang was incredibly wealthy, with the only shortage being provisions. These were strictly controlled and transported upwards, bypassing this area. After all, the nobles were transporting gold, silver, and military supplies, each ship capable of purchasing hundreds of thousands of dan of provisions. There was no need to steal food. It wasn't worthwhile or profitable. However, the first thing Jian Wushuang needed for military expansion was provisions. But this couldn't be implemented yet. He had to gather enough manpower first. After the porters had eaten their fill, they found a cool place to squat, their eyes vacant as they waited for orders. Jian Wushuang gestured with his hand. A servant below immediately shouted out. He gathered the hundreds of porters downstairs. Hearing the summons, their hearts sank. What was inevitable had come. They were all worried about being dismissed. But Jian Wushuang's next words made their eyes light up. "Here is 1,000 taels of silver, all taken from corrupt officials. This money rightfully belongs to you. Today I will distribute it all," he said, and then had people carry it down. There were more than 300 people here, each able to receive 3 taels of silver. That amounted to 30 strings of cash. This money was enough for a family of 7 or 8 to live well for several years. As long as they didn't eat meat, that is. But this was money they received for free. Even if they were dismissed now, they could live off this money. Soon, another 1,000 taels of silver were brought out. This time, their eyes became even more fervent. Could it be? There's more to distribute? My goodness! This is the first time I've received so much money. So, Chun Mozi was this greedy back then. He truly deserved to die. Many couldn't help but curse Chun Mozi's greed, as they had never seen so much silver before. In fact, this silver was all taken by Jian Wushuang from the silver warehouse. Chun Mozi's family assets were all in silver notes, with little actual silver. However, the silver notes couldn't be exchanged for so much silver at the silver warehouse. To prevent these silver notes from becoming worthless paper, Jian Wushuang had Xianxia personally go to the neighboring Xianxia town to exchange them. He had to ensure they were all exchanged. To support people, it had to be cash. As the discussion below grew louder, Jian Wushuang waved his hand. Someone immediately silenced the noise. At this time, Jian Wushuang spoke again. Brothers, there's another 1,000 taels of silver here. I know some people have also been bullied by corrupt officials and extorted by tyrants. Now you must help me distribute this 1,000 taels of silver. 1 tael per person, but there's a condition. At this point, he paused. His goal was to recruit soldiers, not the old, young, or women. So he set a rule. The recipient had to be the eldest son or the head of the household, aged between 18 and 35. These rules didn't concern the porters at all. They immediately turned around to call people. Jian Wushuang gave a time limit. They had to gather by noon tomorrow, or the money would be gone. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone rushed back home like the wind. They either brought relatives or friends. If there weren't enough people in Xianxia town, they would go to other towns. Because they also had benefits. For each person they brought, they would get 5 strings of cash. This rule made them even more frenzied. The first step of distributing money is done. We can find a place to have some tea and look at the people you brought. Jian Wushuang walked down the stairs with his hands behind his back. Wang Luan, recovering from his shock, quickly followed down the stairs. They are all bandits, people I used to know on the road. I arranged them at the tavern. But each one is like a bandit, hard to manage. Wang Luan reminded worriedly. Jian Wushuang didn't care and said, in chaotic times, what we need most are arrogant and fierce generals. In the tavern, the noise was loud. Several of Wang Luan's confidants were entertaining these bandits from around Yongqing. They had already explained their purpose to avoid Jian Wushuang wasting his breath. These bandits were the most informed, knowing that the small dock was rising, and all wanted a piece of the action. They could eat, but it couldn't be just for the meat. Jian Wushuang loved to paint grand visions for others. If these people only wanted to grab some money, he wouldn't bother using them. Theft could be stealing gold and silver or stealing people and affairs. But to become bigger and stronger, it meant stealing a country and the world. Jian Wushuang wanted people with grand ambitions. Of course, he would give them some benefits first. However, these people would make iron-faced Liang uncomfortable. So he chose this time to invite them. Inviting guests, giving money, recruiting, all in one go. At the wine table, Jian Wushuang first probed lightly. Among them, a few introduced by Wang Luan were indeed not bad. They were all skilled, but he also had to see their character. If they were purely troublemakers, he would give them money and send them away, to avoid cleaning up the mess later. Fortunately, the people at his table were all leaders or skilled individuals with trump cards, not short-sighted people. If it were a few short-sighted people, they wouldn't be worthy of sharing a table with him. After Wang Luan's introduction and his own probing, Jian Wushuang quickly made up his mind. You are all lords of your own hills, but my small temple cannot accommodate all of you. Jian Wushuang pursed his lips and showed a bitter smile. This statement left the lords at the table stunned. They had come to cooperate, or to put it bluntly, to seek refuge. Why were they being rejected now? And so decisively, without even giving them a chance to negotiate. When they came, Wang Luan had said Jian Wushuang was a great talent, so they should be more reserved at the drinking table. Each of them was very cautious, without their usual rough demeanor. They were nothing like the people in the downstairs hall. Yet Jian Wushuang still looked down on them. It wasn't their fault. Seeing everyone's dark expressions, Wang Luan also felt that Jian Wushuang was being a bit too arrogant, and quickly gave him a look. It was about enough. These were all bosses of various hills. Not giving them any face could easily backfire. Moreover, their current chips weren't many. It was just that Jian Wushuang had exaggerated too much. The territory only had a force of 5,000 people. But he had boasted it to be 30,000. And now there weren't even 300. It was only the patrol team outside and the 100 heavy infantry that had intimidated these hill lords. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come to negotiate with him. Seeing everyone looking at him, Jian Wushuang chuckled and changed his tone, saying, Brothers, you must have misunderstood me. My meaning is simple. Xianxia town is too small to accommodate me, but other towns can accommodate all of you. I will provide money and manpower to help you build your own forces. The goal is not big 1,000 men for each hill. If you lack money, I'll give money. If you lack men, I'll provide men. Military equipment and trainers will be supplied as well. This statement left everyone, especially Wang Luan, stunned. He looked at Jian Wushuang with an inscrutable expression, perhaps seeing him as a fool. Giving money and men to these bandits wouldn't ruin his own reputation? And if the other party grew too big, what would they do if they stopped listening to him? For a moment, Wang Luan's face turned dark with anger. Jian Wushuang had never discussed this with him, but he held back, not wanting to erupt on the spot. The key was that erupting now wouldn't help. The big bosses at the table were all greedily eyeing Jian Wushuang, and the people in Xianxia town, even though some were his trusted followers, would still belong to Jian Wushuang once they grew stronger. His influence would become less and less. Jian Wushuang noticed Wang Luan's concern, stood up, patted his shoulder, and looked at everyone. He said, I know you all have doubts about why I am doing this. It's actually quite simple. I've been growing rapidly recently, and I don't lack people under me. Moreover, I think it's not necessarily a good thing for everyone to work with me. It's better to develop independently. I'll provide whatever is needed. The only requirement is that when we encounter officials in the future, we must unite. Anyone who betrays will be the first to be eliminated by me. The blatant benefits and threats shocked everyone. They all stood up, drank the wine in their bowls, and swore their oaths. This was considered forming an alliance. The hill bosses called by Wang Luan each had over 100 men. But with small territories, no money, and no people, they couldn't grow stronger. Now, hearing that Jian Wushuang was planning territory for them, they all pricked up their ears to listen to the detailed plan. Jian Wushuang took out a map and marked out the 16 towns of Yongqing. He detailed the division for the 5 hill lords. Each would take 2 towns, which meant 10 towns were divided, leaving 6 towns. Jian Wushuang now had plans for 3 towns. Sha Family Town had already been taken, Qingzhou Town was in the process of being conquered, and Shunshui Town, known as the Granary by the Sea, was also within reach. The last 3 towns were the closest to Yong City. Among them was Qingshan Town, which Jian Wushuang had long heard about. This town's specialty was iron ore. Once it was taken, the supply of military equipment would be secured. There were also 2 major towns which served as the barriers to Yong City, but they couldn't be taken down at the moment and had to be put aside for now. Jian Wushuang didn't disclose all the details, but instead instructed them to return with money to recruit more soldiers. After arranging matters with the mountain lords, there were a few infamous bandits at the table. They had no subordinates and made a living purely through their skills. Hearing Jian Wushuang's grand ambitions, their eyes were now glowing with excitement. Stealing a country, that was the greatest benefit they could ever imagine. Jian Wushuang was very polite to the remaining individuals, especially to a young man with one ear. This person was short but very strong, with eyes that sparkled with intelligence. He was known in the underworld as One Ear. He had a unique way of collecting information and intelligence from the entire coastal area. Therefore, Jian Wushuang valued him highly. Naturally, he offered a high price. Money and resources were provided without limit. Upon hearing this, One Ear was very excited. He usually survived by selling bits of information and didn't hold a particularly high status. Now, he was suddenly on equal footing with the mountain lords and was considered a confidant by Jian Wushuang. This had a significant impact on him. He felt both grateful and excited, finally seeing hope. Brother Wang Luan, first arrange for him 20 good men. When our people return, gather 100. As for gold and silver, let them have their fill, and everyone gets a horse to form their own scouts. Wang Luan, who was beside him, just nodded woodenly. Just a rough calculation showed that they had already spent over 10,000 taels of silver. He was stunned. Never before had they spent so much money in a single day. The key was that the money spent was almost like giving it away, and of course he felt the pain. Brother Wang Luan? Jian Wushuang called out again, seeing that he was still in a daze. Only then did Wang Luan react, hurriedly nodding. Yes, yes, just do as you see fit. He could no longer understand what Jian Wushuang was up to. He simply waved his hand, indicating that Jian Wushuang could do as he pleased. The main reason was that he had witnessed Jian Wushuang's capabilities in recent days. He couldn't match Jian Wushuang in martial prowess or strategy. He could only stay by Jian Wushuang's side and assist him. Jian Wushuang was very satisfied with Wang Luan's lack of opposition. Otherwise, he would have had to find a good position for him. The intelligence and scouting were entrusted to one ear. Jian Wushuang was still considering finding some talented individuals, especially those skilled in martial arts. However, looking at the remaining people, none seemed fit for key positions. But some among them were not entirely useless, so he took them in and had them balance the mountain lords. They were supposed to assist, but in reality it was to monitor and make the two sides compete against each other. Jian Wushuang was only responsible for using and dispatching people. With the main table settled, Wang Luan thought of taking him to other private rooms to show his face, at least to have a look before deciding. However, Jian Wushuang felt it was unnecessary and directly declined. Just as he was about to go downstairs, he heard a commotion in the lobby. "Can't take a loss, can you?" he heard someone shout. A group of men was arm wrestling at a scattered table in the lobby. One of them, having lost, flushed red with anger and almost started a fight. Upon seeing this, Wang Luan frowned and immediately went downstairs to intervene. He addressed the burly man who had shouted, "Brother, please forgive our poor hospitality today. It was my subordinate's fault for being petty." After speaking, he glared at his trusted aide. The burly man, with a black face, quickly waved his hand and said, "Forget it. Forget it. I came this time just to see your small dock's strength. I don't care about this." Oh! Wang Luan's interest was piqued by the man's words. So, this burly man was here to gauge their strength. But to say it so bluntly, his nature seemed too straightforward. Soon, a gentleman in white clothes stopped the burly man, politely cupped his fists at Wang Luan and said, "My brother is a bit simple-minded. I hope Master Wang won't take offense." The term master referred to the head of the dock. The leader of the small dock was naturally the master. Wang Luan, with his broad-minded nature, naturally did not get angry, but he also did not pay much attention to the two men. After a few polite words, he prepared to leave. "There aren't many good fighters at this small dock, not a single one who can fight," the burly man muttered under his breath, causing the atmosphere to tense up again. "What did you say, you black-faced fool?" The men from the small dock immediately stood up, their eyes filled with hostility. The gentleman in white frowned, stepped forward, and covered the burly man's mouth. But it was too late. At this point, even with Wang Luan's broad-mindedness, he couldn't let the burly man leave like this. He had to find a good fighter to challenge the man. Otherwise, they would lose face today. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang also became interested, especially in the duo. The gentleman in white looked like a cunning strategist, while the burly man seemed like a bodyguard, simple-minded but with great strength. "Master Wang, please don't take my brother's drunken words seriously. I'll have him apologize with a drink." The gentleman in white seemed angry, but his eyes held an inscrutable look. Jian Wushuang was very perceptive. He hadn't paid much attention to the small fries that came today, so he sent most of them away. Leaving behind some brutes to conquer cities for him was also a good way to maintain control. But after seeing the gentleman in white's eyes, he felt that today's main event was in the lobby. Before Wang Luan could speak, Jian Wushuang, standing on the stairs, shouted, "As the saying goes, in literature, there's no first place. In martial arts, there's no second place. How can we know if our small dock has any experts without a test?" "Second master." The people in the lobby immediately paid their respects. Jian Wushuang's prestige had greatly increased these days. These people genuinely admired him. Hearing that Jian Wushuang had spoken, everyone was eager to try their skills against the black-faced burly man. Although this black-faced man seemed strong and intimidating, the people at the small dock were all skilled, and having had some drinks, none of them were willing to back down. The man in white brocade looked at Jian Wushuang, guessing his identity, and said nervously, "Although my brother here has some strength, he might not be a match for the brothers of the small dock. Let's forget about it." "No, we can't just forget about it." The black-faced burly man waved his hand and said quickly, "Let's make it quick. All of you come at me." Jian Wushuang smiled faintly and said, "Let's go outside, find a spacious place, so you can show your skills." "That's better. So no one can say they can't use their full strength," the black-faced burly man said and strode outside. Wang Luan nodded in agreement, and several skilled fighters from the small dock followed immediately. As for the man in white brocade, he looked a bit hesitant but couldn't hide his curiosity. Jian Wushuang followed them, wanting to see what the other party was planning. Outside the tavern, a crowd stood in a circle on the open ground. The first to step forward was a strong man from the small dock, bare-chested. Although he wasn't as burly as the black-faced man, his muscles were quite impressive. One was over 9 feet tall, the other slightly shorter. They were evenly matched. "Begin!" Jian Wushuang's voice was indifferent. At the signal, both men made their move. They both extended their hands to grab each other's waist. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang felt it was just ordinary. There was no skill involved. It was just wrestling, a contest of strength. The strong man from the small dock tried to pull the black-faced man, but the difference in strength was too great, and he was thrown to the ground in one swift move. "You black!" Being thrown to the ground, the man was clearly unwilling to accept defeat and tried to get up again, but Wang Luan called him back. A loss was a loss. No need to be a sore loser, otherwise it would be even more embarrassing. One failed, so they switched to another. But none of the skilled fighters from the small dock were a match for the black-faced burly man. This made Wang Luan feel a bit humiliated. A man with a single ear stood beside Jian Wushuang and said softly, "Second in command, I have a few brothers who are quite good. Should we let them try?" "No need. This must be handled by our own people at the small dock." Jian Wushuang didn't mean to say that single-ears men weren't part of the small dock. He just felt that letting newcomers handle it would tarnish their own reputation. He had already noticed that this black-faced man was no ordinary person. In terms of martial arts, even he was no match. "Sir, you are truly skilled. I, Wang, am impressed." Although Wang Luan felt humiliated, he knew it was time to end it. Continuing would only further embarrass them. Some people who were considering joining the small dock also had strange looks in their eyes. Even though the small dock now had its own territory and influence, with plenty of money and men, the quality wasn't impressive. "Stopping so soon? I haven't even warmed up yet." The black-faced man raised his head disdainfully. At this moment, the man in white brocade only smiled silently, not attempting to stop him. Jian Wushuang, standing at the back, took a deep breath. It was almost his turn to step in. Both the black-faced man and the man in white brocade were not simple. He either had to recruit them or eliminate them early. He couldn't let them go. Moreover, they were definitely not just two people. There had to be accomplices who hadn't revealed themselves yet. "If you haven't warmed up yet, how about a few moves with me?" Jian Wushuang said, stepping forward with his sword. Everyone was taken aback, but soon understood. Last time, Jian Wushuang had defeated the Tiger Head Captain, and the news had spread widely. Now, he was well known in the martial world. He was known as the sword god of Shijiaku. The white-clad gentleman saw Jian Wushuang approaching with his sword and was taken aback. He kindly advised, "Second boss, if you use a weapon, my dark-faced brother here wields a giant battle axe. I think we should just spar lightly. There's no need to be so serious. As a guest, how can I be negligent? Since you're not satisfied, I'll accompany this brother for a proper match." Jian Wushuang replied, drawing his sword directly. The dark-faced man also took out a pair of terrifying battle axes from his back. With his strong arms, he swung the massive axes with ease, though his technique was lacking. Jian Wushuang's swordsmanship was based on the unparalleled technique he mastered as Immortal. This sword technique was flawless, leaving no openings. The axes couldn't even touch him. The sword light flashed, forcing the crowd to retreat repeatedly, and even the white-clad gentleman frowned deeply. He was also a swordsman, but compared to Jian Wushuang, his skills were child's play. The dark-faced man was continuously forced back by Jian Wushuang's attacks, his axes always striking empty air, unable to touch Jian Wushuang. Meanwhile, the cold sword tip was always aimed at his throat. With no room to retreat, he had to raise his axes to protect his face. "We surrender!" the white-clad gentleman shouted loudly. Jian Wushuang then placed the sword tip against the dark-faced man's throat, just moments away from knocking him down. The dark-faced man took a deep breath, put down his axes, and saw that the sword tip was less than an inch from his neck, instantly breaking into a cold sweat. He wasn't one to fear death, but the chill of the sword tip against his throat made him break out in a cold sweat, not daring to move. Another reason was that this match was not a life-and-death battle. A light touch was enough. Jian Wushuang calmly sheathed his sword, cupped his hands, and said, "Brother, you have great strength, but your technique with the battle axes needs improvement. If you had a suitable axe technique, I wouldn't be your match. Second boss, you're too modest. Not only do you have exceptional strategy, but your martial prowess is also outstanding. Truly a hero of both pen and sword." The white-clad gentleman quickly stepped forward, no longer testing Jian Wushuang's patience. The dark-faced man felt the same. He only respected strength. Jian Wushuang's victory earned his respect. At this moment, he looked at Jian Wushuang with admiration. "You're exaggerating. I'm just a small wave in this chaotic world. You two are also extraordinary. How about we discuss this further by the canal?" Jian Wushuang modestly offered, giving them ample face before extending the olive branch. The white-clad gentleman was now completely convinced and cupped his hands. "It would be my pleasure." With the issue resolved, the small dock's reputation was maintained. Moreover, Jian Wushuang earned even more admiration from these people. Regardless of strategy or martial skill, he excelled, making him a valuable person to follow in this chaotic world. This made Wang Luan somewhat embarrassed. He couldn't beat Jian Wushuang, and now he wasn't as popular as Jian Wushuang. Although he had many loyal followers, only about 100 people, if Jian Wushuang raised his arm, half might leave with him. Moreover, any new recruits would inevitably join Jian Wushuang's ranks. Luckily, Jian Wushuang didn't care about these things. In the wooden building at Shijiaku, Jian Wushuang personally entertained the white-clad gentleman and the dark-faced man. During the banquet, he learned their names. Although he hadn't been in Binhai County for long, he had learned about some of the county's notable figures and scholars. These two were not scholars but notorious villains. Speaking of the black-faced burly man Black Bull, he was a notorious bandit within the county, known for his brute strength. He once single-handedly took on a group of constables at a yamen and held his ground. Jian Wushuang had experienced his prowess firsthand. Black Bull's nickname was also quite prominent. He was known in the martial world as the Mad Bull. As for the white-robed gentleman, one could not judge him solely based on his appearance. This person was even more feared by the authorities than Black Bull. Behind him stood a gang of 800 ruthless bandits. He was the chief strategist of Qingshui Mountain, known by the nickname Finger Zen Star Wu Xing. Wu Xing was both brave and cunning, making him a leading figure in the coastal county. Understanding the identity of the two, Jian Wushuang began to ponder their intentions. Compared to these two, he was far less experienced and powerful. The 800 men on Qingshui Mountain were not just porters but real bandits who killed without hesitation. Now that these two had come to Sha Family Town, what were they planning? After 3 rounds of drinks, Jian Wushuang began to probe. "Brother Wu, you didn't come here just to test me, did you?" Hearing this, Wu Xing slowly put down his wine cup, his expression becoming more serious. He then lowered his voice and said, "To be honest, I came here with a mission from our mountain lord." "Oh!" Jian Wushuang pretended to be puzzled. "What mission? If I can help, just say the word." In fact, there was no need to ask to know what they were thinking. They were likely wary of his rapid development and had come to test him. If his strength was mediocre, they could easily annex him. If his strength was comparable to or even greater than Qingshui Mountain, they would consider cooperation. Now was a good time for Wu Xing's visit, as Jian Wushuang's forces had not yet fully developed. They only had a preliminary plan. Even if Jian Wushuang was brave and resourceful, he was not worth Qingshui Mountain's full effort. Wu Xing's opening words confirmed Jian Wushuang's suspicion. The mission from Qingshui Mountain was versatile, essentially to adapt their message based on the situation. From Wu Xing's words, Jian Wushuang understood his worth. They considered him a potential threat. Cooperation. Yes. Wu Xing nodded slowly and continued. Our Qingshui Mountain is in the southwest. Although not near the canal, it is the lifeline of Yong City's land routes. If Brother Wushuang can secure the lifeline of the waterways, the next time we drink, it will be in Yong City. Ha ha. Jian Wushuang laughed loudly but did not respond. There was only one Yong City which could not be shared. However, Wu Xing's words also carried a veiled threat. The land routes were indeed controlled by Qingshui Mountain. If they wanted to take Yong City, navigating upstream by water was too dangerous, and their small boats would be useless. The best way was to take the land route, but it was currently in the hands of Qingshui Mountain. Cooperation was imminent, but future conflicts were likely. Deciding who would control Yong City was a significant issue. Jian Wushuang's hesitation was justified, as Wu Xing also had reservations. Qingshui Mountain's intention was clear. Cooperate to take Yong City, but who would be in charge would depend on strength. This matter is of great importance. I need to discuss it with Brother Wang Luan. Also, my recent development has been rapid, and I haven't fully assimilated it yet. There's no rush. Jian Wushuang did not agree directly and used Wang Luan to dodge the question. Wang Helmsman, Wu Xing murmured, his tone somewhat strange when calling Wang Luan's name. If an ordinary person were to listen, they would definitely sense something off. He was practically saying it directly. What was Wang Luan to him? Wouldn't it be more satisfying to kill and establish himself as king, rather than working under a small-time crook? But Wu Xing was smart. He didn't say it outright but hinted subtly instead. He started talking about the ranking order of Qingshui Mountain. Brother Wushuang, you are a man of both literary and martial talents. Even in our Qingshui Mountain, you have the demeanor of a mountain lord. Moreover, my brother has always trusted people without a doubt, and those capable always have more work without a second word. To be honest, we currently lack someone like you in Qingshui Mountain, and the position of Deputy Mountain Lord has been vacant for a long time. Jian Wushuang feigned interest and said, Really? That's not what I heard. Everyone in Binhai County knows that Qingshui Mountain has no shortage of capable heroes. How could they lack talent? Such probing and temptation were of little use to him. An ordinary person might be tempted at this moment and, even if they didn't join Qingshui Mountain, would at least get rid of Wang Luan. But Jian Wushuang wouldn't do that. Who the boss was didn't matter to him. What mattered were the chips in his hand. The meal was rich in flavor. Aside from trying to win him over, they also discussed their worldview. Although there were some conspiracies at the beginning, they ended up chatting like kindred spirits. From the situation in Jiang country, they talked about the structure of this world. Before drinking, they were just a bunch of petty thieves in Binhai County, Jiang country. But after drinking, the entire South 7 countries were nothing to them. Their conversation extended to the other side of the sea. The prosperous Tang dynasty. That was the pinnacle of a nation. Having finally met a well-read and talented person, Jian Wushuang asked many questions about how vast this world was. He only knew that the Tang dynasty was large, but he didn't know more details. Wu Xing not only understood geography but also knew astronomy. After hearing his words, he pondered for a while and, after a slight pause, said, Don't laugh, what I say might be subjective, but besides these scattered continents, I guess there is definitely a supercontinent deep in the ocean, and on that continent, there are definitely the rumored immortals. Immortals! Jian Wushuang's eyes widened. Even though it was just speculation, he wanted to hear more about such things. That's right. I studied under Yannan Mountain. My master once had the fortune to travel to the South Sea Immortal Island. It was called an immortal island because there were some Taoist priests on the island. However, one of the islands did have a qi cultivator who could control a sword with qi. It was extremely mysterious. It was said that he learned his immortal techniques from that supercontinent. Wu Xing spoke eloquently. Jian Wushuang asked a few more questions. Unfortunately, it was all based on his master's early experiences, which had now turned to dust, at least a whole cycle of 60 years ago. It was impossible to find it now. But this gave Jian Wushuang confidence. It showed that there were indeed immortals in this world. Although he didn't know how strong they were, as long as he could cultivate, it was enough. From these fragmentary pieces of information, Jian Wushuang also found a clue. That was, all these rumors were related to qi cultivation. Whether it was the qi cultivators of the Tang dynasty, the qi cultivators of the Immortal Island, or the qigong of King Xiaoyang. It seemed that everything was related to energy. This was different from the cultivation systems in the outside world. But there were still traces to follow. He had been to many worlds and could even create worlds, forging new cultivation systems. Night fell. He arranged for Wu Xing and the other to stay at an inn, as they had to leave early the next morning. He decided to stay at the inn himself. In the room, without a trace of sleepiness, he came to the window, gazing at the bright moon, his mind filled with thoughts. He wasn't thinking about the day's events but pondering over this world. When he first entered, demons surrounded him, desperately trying to escape. He remembered that beneath the black fog was a vast ocean. Initially, he thought that ocean was where they had come from. But now he no longer thought so. This world couldn't contain those demons. Back then, the monsters in the black fog were all incredibly powerful, reaching the level of universe gods, with some even at the 6-star universe god level. Such powerful beings could shatter his current world with a single move. This world is probably a multiverse with an upper and lower realm, and this place is most likely the lower realm. Jian Wushuang sighed inwardly. If that was the case, it would be even harder for him to leave. He had been brought here, his consciousness cut off. He didn't know how long it would take for someone to discover him. Although Hui Qing and the others often contacted him, the intervals were too long for his current mortal body. The last contact was 100,000 epochs ago. If he had to wait another 100,000 epochs, he didn't know how many times he would reincarnate. Even if he contacted them early and they discovered his isolated consciousness and came to rescue him, where would they start? Finding the Realm King or even the Great Realm King might be useless. His true strength in the outside world at his peak was stronger than the Realm King God. He could be considered the number one person under spacetime. Even he could be isolated. This world was far from simple. Moreover, the girl named Xing Luo carried the aura of Wan Lu. Her name had the word star, reminding him of star spirit. The Wan Lu divine tree had been taken away long ago, yet its aura appeared in this world. Jian Wushuang couldn't figure it out and fell into a deep sleep on the reclining chair. In his dream, he saw that figure again, facing away from him. This time he was calm, just watching. Suddenly, a name appeared in his mind. Prophet. Just as he remembered this name, he was awakened by someone. Jian Wushuang felt a bit helpless, shaking his head, trying to reconnect his consciousness to that scene, but it didn't reappear in his mind. He even muttered prophet a few times to himself. The surrounding world remained unchanged. In the end, he gave up. Outside the door, Xianxia knocked a few times, and seeing no response, he pushed the door open. We're rich. This time we've hit it big. Xianxia strode into the room, holding a cloth bag. Clatter. He poured out the contents of the bag, revealing gold and silver jewels. But Jian Wushuang didn't care at all. He was still brooding over the dream. Xianxia lowered his voice and said, "This is just a small part. I exchanged the silver notes this time, and on the way, I robbed 10 carts worth 10,000 taels." Oh! Jian Wushuang still didn't care, merely giving a slight response. This puzzled Xianxia, who asked in surprise, "What's wrong with you? Aren't you curious whose hands I took all this money from?" "Who?" Jian Wushuang asked cooperatively. "Qing Shui Mountain." Upon hearing this, he immediately widened his eyes in astonishment. What did you say? This is from Xianxia Mountain? No, it's that Xianxia Mountain didn't get it. I intercepted it, Xiangyang said proudly. You don't know, I only had a dozen men with me, and we snatched the food from the tiger's mouth. Trouble, Jian Wushuang said, frowning. I forgot to tell you. The white paper fan of Qingshan Mountain is staying at this inn. Wu Xing. Xiangyang was also somewhat surprised. He hadn't expected people from Qingshan Mountain to appear here. But since the tribulation had already occurred, it could only be said that their opponents were not as capable as them. 100,000 taels of silver. This was a fortune. The entire Qingshan Mountain probably didn't have that much silver. What do we do now? Xiangyang asked in astonishment. Jian Wushuang thought for a moment and said, Qingshan Mountain will eventually clash with us. Since we've already taken it, we might as well keep it. But let's allow them to leave for now. If we hold them hostage, it would be a bit embarrassing for us. Currently, they were still bandits, not yet considered a rebel army. After all, they hadn't done anything good. Being a bandit wasn't just about fighting and killing, but also about dealing with people. Otherwise, who would come to join you? Just yesterday, he had recruited a group of various bandit leaders. If they now did something against their credibility, the money spent would be wasted. As for snatching food from a tiger's mouth, it wasn't quite accurate. Qingshan Mountain lacked the capability, and they couldn't be blamed for that. Moreover, if this incident got out, it would damage Qingshan Mountain's reputation instead. Currently, Qingshan Mountain was still the top bandit group in Binhai County. If outsiders learned that Qingshan Mountain had been humiliated by the people at the small pier, it would enhance the reputation of the small pier instead. So Jian Wushuang decided to stay calm and do nothing. From what he understood yesterday, Wu Xing was also a prominent figure in these chaotic times. He definitely wouldn't dare take risks, nor would he actively make an enemy of the small pier. After a brief discussion, Jian Wushuang sent Xiangyang to Shajia port, as they had to distribute money today. He still needed to see off Wu Xing and Black Ox. Outside the inn, 2 swift horses were already prepared. After exchanging a few pleasantries with Wu Xing, Jian Wushuang watched their figures disappear from sight before turning back to the inn. Currently, there were multiple fronts to manage. He had entrusted Xiangyang with gathering people. Wang Luan and others were responsible for detailed planning. He was waiting for iron-faced Liang Chen. This was crucial. Once they gained the support of his father-in-law, they would shed their bandit status and become a rebel army, making the subsequent attack on Yongqing much smoother. Since the Jiang Kingdom did not dare resist the invasion of the Yu Kingdom, they would take up this banner. Jian Wushuang stood by the window on the 2nd floor of the inn, staring at the distant path. By mid-morning, a group of people finally appeared on the path. The sound of hoofbeats was scattered, and the number of people was not many. Jian Wushuang hurried downstairs, and by then the group had arrived. Leading them was the tiger-head captain, Tang Eru. The rest were all lightly armored cavalry. You must be Jian Wushuang. Tang Eru glanced at him, his gaze lofty and filled with arrogance. Jian Wushuang couldn't understand why the other party was so arrogant, especially after being captured by him. Despite his situation, he still put on airs. However, Jian Wushuang was broad-minded and didn't care about it. He calmly replied, Yes, it's me. Humph. If it weren't for the instructor's order, I would settle the score with you today for ambushing me last time. Tang Eru shouted angrily. Hearing the word instructor, Jian Wushuang frowned. Things were indeed more complicated than he had imagined. The instructor of Qingshan Town was a worldly wise man. It was impossible for him to join a group of bandits based on his son-in-law's words alone. But Jian Wushuang hadn't expected that iron-faced Liangqin would be detained. And now Tang Eru was taking him to Qingshan Town without explaining why. Jian Wushuang could tolerate previous matters, but this was too much for him. He didn't give a clear answer, being ordered around in such a high-handed manner. A whistle escaped his lips, startling the horses into motion. Before long, a team of cavalry charged over. It was the 50 light cavalry newly formed at the small dock. Leading them was Scarred Xian. Upon seeing Tang Eru, he couldn't help but mock. "Oh, who do we have here? It's you, the defeated one." After his taunt, he dismounted without glancing at Tang Eru's expression and walked toward Jian Wushuang. Iron-faced Liangshan has been detained. Just now, someone from Qingshan town received the news, Scarred Xian said, handing a bamboo tube to Jian Wushuang. The statement left Tang Eru stunned. He had just left Qingshan town and knew the situation there better than anyone. He was astonished by how quickly Jian Wushuang had received the information. In truth, Jian Wushuang hadn't expected the news to come so swiftly either. The people he had deployed yesterday had already started sending information today. Moreover, they delivered the information he wanted without needing his instructions. He casually opened the bamboo tube, revealing a piece of paper. "Come, we can talk." A simple forward message in iron-faced Liangshan's handwriting. Jian Wushuang crumpled the paper. He had already intended to visit Qingshan town to meet the instructor. But Tang Eru's intimidation had left him feeling uncomfortable. He needed to keep these people as leverage. If he got detained there, it would be a wasted effort. "Detain them and prepare a fast horse for me," Jian Wushuang ordered, signaling for action. Tang Eru glared and shouted, "Jian Wushuang, how dare you? Why wouldn't I dare?" Jian Wushuang quickly drew his sword, striking Tang Eru off his horse, then stepping onto Tang Eru's shoulder to mount the horse. He calmly said, "No need to prepare a horse. This one will do just fine." "Understood." Taking down this tiger lieutenant was just like last time. The others didn't dare to act further. Tang Eru had come to invite Jian Wushuang to Qingshan town, but as a defeated general, he was too embarrassed to speak directly. He had wanted to regain some dignity but was once again defeated by Jian Wushuang. No need to take them to the small dock. Just entertain them well at the inn. After his orders, Jian Wushuang tightened the reins and prepared to leave. Scarred Xian, worried, asked, "Shouldn't we take some men with us? There are still officials in Qingshan town." "No need." Without looking back, he spurred his horse straight to Qingshan town. Fortunately, the road was wide and unobstructed, and he reached Qingshan town within an hour. From the outside, Qingshan town was much larger than Xianxia town. It was once the base of the most elite Qinglei battalion of the Jiang kingdom. Over time, it became a military town due to the large number of military families. If it weren't for the invasion of the Yu kingdom, there would be more than 200 people stationed here. Entering Qingshan town, he inquired about the legendary old instructor's residence and dismounted to walk towards a small alley. This legendary instructor, Yang Zixing, had once been the chief instructor of the 100,000 Qinglei army, yet he lived in such a humble alley. After walking a few steps, he saw an old-fashioned large gate with a gold-edged plaque above it that read Yang Mansion. Jian Wushuang tied his horse to the post and walked to the door, knocking gently a few times. Before long, someone opened the door. It was a young girl with freckles on her face. When she saw him, she shyly lowered her head and then turned around, calling into the courtyard, "Dad, we have a guest." Jian Wushuang remained calm. He had seen countless shy girls from northern spacetime to Realm God continent. After the girl finished calling out, she said softly, "Come in first. My dad is drinking with my brother-in-law." She led Jian Wushuang inside. Entering the small courtyard, Jian Wushuang realized it was more spacious than it appeared from the outside. Despite the alley's narrowness, the yard was quite large, with various standard weapons hanging on the walls, including swords, spears, and staffs. This fit with what he knew about Instructor Yang. While he was observing the courtyard, an energetic old man with an aquiline nose and piercing eyes stood at the doorway of the main house, exuding vigor. Feeling the gaze from those sharp eyes, Jian Wushuang turned to look towards the doorway. "I am Jian Wushuang. Greetings to Instructor Yang." His voice was steady, and he only cupped his hands in salute, without bowing. For a mortal to receive such respect from him was quite remarkable. He mainly admired the old man's experiences. Though a mortal, his life was extraordinary. Instructor Yang stepped out of the main house, his sharp eyes scrutinizing Jian Wushuang, especially noting the sword at his side. with a peculiar gleam in his eyes. "How skilled is your swordsmanship? In my life, I have never been defeated." Jian Wushuang's arrogant words left Tai Mian Liangchen, who was inside the main house, stunned. This was different from the Jian Wushuang he knew. The Jian Wushuang he knew was modest and reserved. How could he be so provocative and boastful upon meeting his father-in-law? Unlike the ambitious Jian Wushuang he remembered. What he didn't know was that Jian Wushuang was simply speaking the truth. Coincidentally, I too have never met an adversary in my life, though I use a spear. Instructor Yang suddenly pushed off his back leg, charging towards him, a long spear appearing in his hand at some point. The spear had spun, causing Jian Wushuang's eyes to blur. The speed was extremely fast, leaving Jian Wushuang no room for carelessness. He sidestepped narrowly, drawing his sword from his waist. Though he no longer had divine power, he was still well-versed in mortal techniques. The opponent's spear technique was fierce, not the orderly thrust, sweep, and cut of military training, but a wild and untamed style. This style was unsuitable for the military but perfect for the martial world. Jian Wushuang parried the ferocious attacks with his sword. Despite the intricacies of the opponent's spear technique, he was a master of weapons in this world. Seizing an opportunity, he kicked the spearhead away and, with a move Instructor Yang had never seen, sliced through the spear, the sword's edge hovering at his throat. Everything happened quickly. Their duel, from start to finish, took only a few breaths. Defeating an elderly man in such a short time was nothing to be proud of. But Instructor Yang, with his unyielding spirit, was captivated by Jian Wushuang's technique. He felt that even in his younger days, he couldn't have defeated Jian Wushuang. The swordsmanship just displayed was not something a mortal like him could counter. "Brother Wushuang, please give me some face. My father-in-law didn't come here to make things difficult for you." Tai Mian Liangchen came out to mediate the situation. This also allowed the freckled little girl, who was scared stiff, to realize that her father was still being held at sword point by Jian Wushuang. She stood there, dumbfounded, staring at Jian Wushuang, which was a bit unreasonable. "Apologies." Jian Wushuang sheathed his sword, his tone indifferent. However, Coach Yang didn't mind at all. He pointed towards the inner room and said solemnly, "A hero truly emerges from the youth. Liangchen's assessment of you was not overestimated, but rather underestimated. Indeed, someone like Tai Mian Liangchen would never truly understand Jian Wushuang. It was his father-in-law who had a keen eye for people." Jian Wushuang did not feign modesty. He sheathed his sword and walked proudly towards the inner room. Since he had already used tactics to subdue the other party, there was no need to act as if he were desperate for talent. That was appropriate for scholars, not for seasoned veterans like these. This legendary coach was not a good person in his youth. He just happened to serve the court by chance. If it had been the older Tai Mian Liangchen, Jian Wushuang would have had to spend more effort in persuasion. Entering the house, Tai Mian Liangchen served as an introduction, and the subsequent discussion was between Jian Wushuang and Coach Yang. They talked until evening. It was simple and quick. Although it seemed like an entire afternoon, to settle such a matter of rebellion in half a day was already very fast. It was merely a division of interests and the probability of future success. Dealing with these ordinary people, Jian Wushuang could be said to be a dimensional reduction strike. He went straight to the point. He knew that Coach Yang had a son in Yong City, but his son was a scholar and did not follow in his father's footsteps. This made things even simpler. Jian Wushuang directly promised that if his son had the ability, he would surely be a man of great power. Moreover, Qingshan town would remain unchanged, and all that was required was for him to train the soldiers. The matters of going to the battlefield did not need to involve his family. Tai Mian Liangchen couldn't do this either. As for his two daughters, one was already married, and there was nothing more to arrange for her. The benefits could only be given to Tai Mian Liangchen. The other daughter was even simpler. To bind this old man to his worship completely, he offered a perfect arrangement. This made Coach Yang very happy. After dark, Jian Wushuang left with Tai Mian Liangchen. They agreed to return to Qingshan town in 3 days with men and various military supplies. One important matter among them was the proposal of marriage. Leaving Qingshan town, they hurried back to Shijiaku. At this time, a continuous stretch of tents had already been set up here, extending along the river for 10 miles. Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang was stunned. Tai Mian Liangqin, on the other hand, was very calm. In times of chaos, there are too many people just for a mouthful of food. Moreover, Jian Wushuang had offered high prices to expand his manpower. Unexpectedly, so many people had been attracted. These tents were all military supplies they had looted, and they didn't expect to use them at this time. Outside the camp, the 100 or so people from earlier were now patrolling the camp in an orderly manner. As soon as he walked into Shijiaku, One Ear came running to report. Before heading to Qingshan town, he had arranged for One Ear to go to Yong City to pick someone up. As for who he was picking up, it was naturally Tai Mian Liangqin's brother-in-law, the son of Koqiang. Seeing his brother-in-law, Tai Mian Liangqin was surprised by Jian Wushuang's thorough preparation. It was too comprehensive. This was not like recruiting a coach, but rather like recruiting a general. Jian Wushuang didn't say much, just patted him on the shoulder, telling him to have a good talk with his brother-in-law. He himself went to the headquarters at the pier. At this time, Wang Luan was talking with a few unfamiliar faces. Seeing him return, he hurriedly stepped forward with concern. "Wushuang, are you okay? I heard from Scarred Xian that you went to Qingshan town alone. I was worried sick." "No worries, it's all settled over there. Now we just need our people to move in." After saying this, he looked at those unfamiliar faces and then at Wang Luan. "By the way, let me introduce you. These are brothers from Langshan County, and they brought hundreds of skilled hands." Wang Luan introduced them one by one. It turned out these people had come as refugees. They said there were hundreds of them, but in fact they also brought along thousands of family members. Refugees. Providing them with food could solve the problem, but if not, it could backfire at any time. This was not as easy to arrange as those who had homes, but there was one benefit: they would work very hard. So the most important thing now was not to give them money, but to settle them down. The entire Binhai County appeared in his mind. They all pointed to one place: Xianxia town. Jian Wushuang stood up, pointing to the town by the canal on the map and said, "Brother Wang, the most urgent thing now is to take Xianxia town. In the future, it will serve as our granary and also provide a place for these brothers. There's no rush. Our grain supplies—" Wang Luan hesitated a bit. It wasn't that he didn't trust Jian Wushuang's judgment, but Xianxia town was not something they could covet at this time. If they needed grain, they could buy it from Xianxia town. But to take Xianxia town seemed a bit too ambitious. Although Xianxia town didn't have imperial soldiers, it did have a tyrant, Master Huang. No one in the entire Yongcheng, even Binhai County, didn't know this man. He had 800 retainers, ruthless men who could settle a mountain dispute with ease. He had money and men. If they attacked Xianxia town, they couldn't avoid this Master Huang. Wang Luan waved his hand, signaling those people to leave. Only Jian Wushuang and he remained in the room. Then he spoke. "Making a move now would be very unfavorable for us. It's better to settle these brothers in Shajia town first, and wait for our manpower to increase before taking Xianxia town. It's not too late then." This was actually understandable. Most people would think this way. But Jian Wushuang saw further. He could use money and grain to win people over now. But couldn't Master Huang do the same? If your lips are gone, your teeth will feel the cold. If your neighbor amasses troops, you would be forced to recruit soldiers too. The current imperial court was almost a puppet. He had taken Shajia town for so many days, and there was little reaction from Yongcheng. Once this door was opened, countless people would follow. Why did Wu Xing from Qingshui Mountain come? Wasn't it just to test the ambition of the little peer? Once ambition began to manifest, it couldn't be hidden. He didn't even need to say anything. Others could guess just by watching what he did. So he couldn't wait. He had to take Xianxia town quickly, even Qingshui Mountain. By taking these two tough spots, he could integrate Binhai County. build his own power and use the stakes of mortals to meet the little King Liang. Or rather, to approach the little King Liang. As for these stakes, they could be let go at any time. The first choice, the first target, was still the path of cultivation. Or rather, a way to leave here. That was the most important thing. Seeing him so persistent, Wang Luan felt a bit helpless. There was no way. There would always be a clash. Brother Wang, what you said is actually very true. We don't have enough manpower to deal with Master Huang right now. But we have to give it a try. Born in chaotic times, we don't have much time. As soon as he finished speaking, Xianxia walked in from outside. Seeing him return, there was no surprise. He took a sip of water first, then slowly said, "So, how did it go over there in Qingshu town?" Xianxia changed the subject, and Wang Luan didn't continue talking about the matters in Shunshui town. Gathered together, Jian Wushuang began to recount the affairs of Qingshu town. "What? You want me to marry Coach Yang's daughter?" Xiangyang's eyes widened in disbelief. Jian Wushuang nodded, tapped the table, signaling for him to calm down, then glanced at Wang Luan before continuing. "Coach Yang is crucial to us. If you marry his daughter, he will take charge of training our troops. Within 3 months, we can form a team of 5,000 men. You've seen the people outside. More will keep coming. By next spring, we could have a force of 30 to 50,000. Making a small sacrifice now is not a bad thing for the greater cause." Actually, this was meant for Wang Luan to hear. But Xiangyang didn't know that. He was still thinking about Xing Luo. Whether it was due to his feelings outside or his desire to leave here, he needed Xing Luo's help. Although they had been tricked by her once, they couldn't give up. If he got married and had children here, it would be over for him. What if Xing Luo was secretly watching them? Jian Wushuang patted Xiangyang on the shoulder, understanding what he was thinking. He was just worried about Xing Luo seeing. But Jian Wushuang hoped Xing Luo would see, perhaps prompting her to act. It might save them from being buried here. It was all a gamble. If it succeeded, maybe he wouldn't have to waste his efforts fighting with mortals here. After convincing Xiangyang, they began preparing to send people to Qingshu town. But in the meantime, they still needed these people to take over Shunshui town. Late at night, he summoned Yi. "How much do you know about Master Huang of Shunshui town?" Jian Wushuang got straight to the point. He didn't want to drag things out. If feasible, he could act by noon the next day. Yi didn't expect this question. Smart as he was, he quickly deduced Jian Wushuang's intentions and immediately shared everything he knew, including some analysis. Master Huang, named Huang Zhilang, was the 9th in the Huang family. He killed his 8 brothers to seize control of the family. Although ruthless, he was quite capable, keeping Shunshui town firmly in his grasp for years. Now over 50, he had just married his 18th concubine, living a life of luxury. This man is extremely cold-hearted but very loyal to his subordinates. Of his 800 retainers, not all are fighters. Only about 500 can actually fight. The rest are involved in various side activities like managing Shunshui town's fertile lands. Yi detailed meticulously. Jian Wushuang nodded silently. He wasn't worried about the retainers, but their loyalty concerned him. Hearing Yi's analysis, he felt even less confident. Being very loyal to subordinates meant there would be people willing to sacrifice their lives. This was quite difficult to handle. Initially, he thought the other party was a miser and planned to find a few good hands, sneak into the Huang family at night, and capture Master Huang first. Then he would persuade him and it would be an easy task. Now, it seemed that this plan was not feasible. However, he did not have enough manpower, so the decapitation operation could still be preserved. He then asked about Huang Zhilang's hobbies and weaknesses. The brothel. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes slightly. Sure enough, neither heroes nor tyrants could resist the allure of a beautiful woman. Based on this weakness, he could devise his plan. One ear. Find a few clever fellows and come with me to Shunshui town tomorrow. Jian Wushuang said with his hands behind his back. Yes. One ear agreed without hesitation, but he was puzzled in his heart. If they only brought a few people to Shunshui town, it would be fine for reconnaissance, but if they made a move, they wouldn't get close. Although he knew Jian Wushuang's swordsmanship was extraordinary, he didn't think Jian Wushuang could fight 100 on his own. After sending one ear away, only Jian Wushuang was left alone. Now everyone was busy with their own affairs. Xianxia town was becoming more stable and prosperous. The next morning, Jian Wushuang had just stepped out of the Jusha tower when he noticed that yesterday's tents had all disappeared. Outside it was unusually quiet. He pulled someone over and asked, only to learn that everyone had been taken by Xiangyang to the warehouse to move the military supplies. All the supplies taken from the small pier and Sha family mouth were being moved out. These things had to be sent to Qingshu town in advance. People could arrive later, but the goods had to be faster. Otherwise, the process would be delayed. Suddenly, Xianxia town had an influx of more than 10,000 people, and all the expenses were pressed on the small pier. Every day when they opened their eyes, they needed to spend thousands of silver taels. This made Wang Luin very distressed. So he handed the accounts to iron-faced Liang Chen's brother-in-law to manage. Out of sight, out of mind. As for personnel arrangements, Jian Wushuang had no strong opinions. His matters were more important now. Without eating, he went straight to the inn. There was still an important guest here. Jian Wushuang, when are you going to let us go? The guest seemed unhappy, glaring at Jian Wushuang. This guest was none other than Tang Eru, whom he had knocked off his horse yesterday. We're all on the same side now. Why still act so distant? Jian Wushuang walked towards him indifferently, found a seat, sat down, and looked at the table full of good food, pretending to be concerned. How is it? Is the food to your taste? Humph. Stop trying to cozy up to me. It's useless unless I see Coach Yang. Tang Eru turned his head away. At this moment, iron-faced Liang Chun happened to bring in Coach Yang's youngest son, Yang Sheng. Upon seeing Coach Yang's son, Tang Eru couldn't sit still. Junior Yang, what are you doing here? Before the scholarly Yang Sheng could speak, Jian Wushuang explained in advance. I brought him over. From now on, Brother Yang will also be stationed at the small dock. No, at the coastal guard. Also, your eldest brother Tang Daqian will come today, along with your sister. They will all be working in the coastal guard in the future. Your mother is getting old, so I couldn't arrange anything for her. But I have found 2 clever young girls to take care of her. By now, they should have already left Yongqing. Such detailed arrangements were made by him as soon as he returned from Qingshan town. Tang Eru was also stunned by his meticulous planning. His mouth agape. Now he had no choice but to comply. Having been captured twice by Jian Wushuang, Tang Eru took a deep breath, stood up, and clasped his fists toward Jian Wushuang, saying, Subordinate Tang Eru pays respect to the second leader. As he stood up, the dozen or so confidants he had brought with him also stood up and bowed to Jian Wushuang. This made Yang Sheng, who had just met him, very impressed, and even the iron-faced Liang Chan was full of admiration for Jian Wushuang's methods, though they were ultimately mere mortals. Capturing a military brute was too easy for Jian Wushuang. He just needed to cater to their interests. We're all on the same side, no need to be so formal. Come, let's have breakfast together. There are still things to do later. Jian Wushuang casually gestured for everyone to sit down. If there's anything you need me to do, just let me know. Don't mention just a meal. Even going to the battlefield is nothing. At this moment, Tang Eru no longer had his previous arrogance. He had no choice as Jian Wushuang had arranged everything for his entire family so perfectly that he had no reason to resist. Besides, he was not valued in Yongqing before. If it weren't for Instructor Yang, he wouldn't even have made it to a captain in Qingshan town. Being a captain was just a nominal title. In Yongqing, the 4 major captains each held significant power, while he had only about 200 men. Now, they had all been summoned by Jian Wushuang. No rush. Let's eat first. Jian Wushuang pressed his wrist down. He was not in a hurry at all. After breakfast, iron-faced Liang Chun took his brother-in-law to continue familiarizing himself with Xianxia town. This would be their base in the future. The rear base would be Qingshan town. Now they still lacked a granary. He wasn't the only one taking action. The mountain lords he had arranged a few days ago were also expanding their influence. The coastal county, located at the rear of Jiang country, was becoming unstable. Originally, it was a retreat route for the powerful families of Jiang country. Now it was chaotic, and they were the most anxious, especially in Yongcheng, which was in a state of turmoil. But all this had nothing to do with Jian Wushuang. He had blocked the waterway, so they had to take the land route. And the land route was blocked by Qingshui Mountain. Even if Qingshui Mountain allowed the government troops to come in and suppress them, once he resisted, it was possible to join forces with Qingshui Mountain to counter the government troops. Even if Qingshui Mountain chose to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight because of Xiangyang's previous encroachments, the people in Yongcheng wouldn't believe it. Moreover, Qingshui Mountain wouldn't just sit back and watch. The current situation was very favorable for Jian Wushuang and his people. Even Tang Eru, a military brute, could see that. Captain Tang, let me ask you a question. What do you think is the most needed thing for cultivating an army? Upon hearing this, Tang Eru, having eaten his fill, immediately responded, First, we need people. The coastal guard doesn't lack people now. Second, we need money. I don't know about this. Third, we need food. I'm guessing we are short on that. Haha. Your analysis is spot on. Jian Wushuang praised generously. This was something anyone would know. He was just using this question to bring up Xianxia town. Hearing him mention Xianxia town, Tang Eru's eyes immediately showed a murderous intent as he angrily said, I know Xianxia town. It's controlled by Huang Zhelang. When I was marginalized in Yongcheng, it was because of his son. This old guy has been accumulating money and food in Xianxia town over the years, and he has many men. Even the 4 major captains of Yongcheng treat him with respect. He's not making it through tonight. Jian Wushuang stood up, touched the hilt of his sword, and continued, Dare you bring your men and follow me to Xianxia town? Why not? I'm still a lieutenant, and the people in Yongcheng don't yet know about the incident in Qingzhou town. We can go openly and justifiably. But killing Huang Zhelang might be challenging. Tang Eru, though a brute, wasn't foolish. Going with just a few men was akin to courting death. What, are you scared? Jian Wushuang taunted. It's only a mere 800 retainers. If I say he dies today, no one can stop it. Tang Eru slapped his thigh and stood up abruptly. Of course, I'm not scared. I'm just worried about your safety. Don't worry about that. If everything goes smoothly, you might not even need to lift a finger. I can handle Huang Zhelang on my own. Jian Wushuang shrugged. With that, he gestured for Yi Air, who was waiting outside the door, to come in. Is everything ready? All set. Jian Wushuang's tone was relaxed. Then let's move out. A group of dozens mounted their swift horses and headed straight for Xianxia town. Along the way, they encountered many refugees from Langshan County, all dragging their families and heading towards Xiajia town. Jian Wushuang smiled at these people. With the smile came pressure. He had to move faster. The little money he had wasn't enough to support so many people. If it weren't for Xiangyang's opportunistic moves, his money wouldn't have lasted 3 months. Now he needed income urgently. Spurring their horses for 4 continuous hours, they finally reached Xianxia town. But they didn't enter directly. Tang Eru, take 2 good men and change into plain clothes. The rest will rest here. Someone will come later to tell you what to do. Jian Wushuang ordered. Tang Eru, without a word, took off his armor. Yi Air was well prepared, handing them plain clothes. Thus, a group of 5 disguised themselves as merchants and entered Xianxia town. Xiajia town was a dock town. Qingzhou town was a military town, while Xianxia town was purely an agricultural town. The town had 30,000 households and a population of over 100,000. Its core area was as prosperous as Yongcheng. Moreover, being by the canal, there were many inns and brothels along the riverbank. Let's find a place to stay first. It's already arranged. Yi Air led them to an inn located on the riverbank. This inn was several times better than the one in Xiajia town. Even the staff looked energetic. Seeing these horseback guests, they greeted them with smiles and helped with the horses. Jian Wushuang dismounted, casually threw out a silver ingot, and said indifferently, "Arrange 2 rooms and prepare a good meal and drinks. No problem at all." The innkeeper, never having seen such a generous guest, smiled even more warmly and led Jian Wushuang and his men to the best private room. "Wait a moment. The rooms are ready, and the food and drinks will be served shortly." The innkeeper then thoughtfully closed the door and went downstairs lightly. Sitting by the window, Jian Wushuang looked at the calm riverbank, planning the night's actions in his mind. Soon, the food and drinks were served, but none of them drank or ate, because Jian Wushuang hadn't moved. After a while, footsteps were heard outside, and Jian Wushuang finally turned his head, signaling Xianxia to open the door. 2 robust men, dressed like martial artists, entered. Xianxia greeted them, introduced them to Jian Wushuang, and said, "These 2 are brothers from Langshan County, highly skilled and efficient." These 2 were assassins Jian Wushuang had previously asked Xianxia to find. Known in the martial world as jackals, the taller one was Jackal and the shorter one was Wolf. Both exuded a chilling aura that warned strangers to keep away. Definitely not ordinary folks. Having them was part of Jian Wushuang's plan. Through his investigation, he found that although Huang Zhilong valued loyalty and treated his retainers well, he was indifferent to his own sons. Perhaps due to past fratricides, he never relinquished power to his sons. Yet, each of his sons aspired to emulate their father and seize power by killing their brothers. But with no power, they could only bide their time. So, if Huang Zhilong died, the Huang family would descend into infighting. Then, they wouldn't care how others developed and wouldn't worry about mutual destruction. He could retreat and hold Xianxia town or advance to support a puppet. This was his plan. To achieve his goal of support, he first had to ensure that he did not personally kill Huang Zhilong. He needed to find others to do it. So, he had One Ear find 2 men from the martial world. Jian Wushuang stood up, personally poured wine for the 2 men and said politely, "I must trouble you 2 brothers this time. I've already arranged your escape route, so just proceed without any worries. No need to be so polite. As long as the payment is sufficient, the 2 of us will never fail, and you don't need to worry about our escape." The voice of the man called Chai was extremely cold, with no hint of emotion. Seeing this, One Ear quickly tried to smooth things over. "Please don't take offense. These 2 brothers have always been like this, and they conduct their business this way too. Good. I will await your good news tonight." Jian Wushuang didn't mind at all. The brothers Chai and Lang drank their wine and then got up to leave. One Ear followed them. He explained the specifics once more before returning to the private room. "Everything is arranged." "Good." Jian Wushuang nodded lightly, then called out, "Don't just stand there, eat and drink as you please. Tonight, we'll go relax at the Xuexiang Pavilion." Tang Eru, however, had lost his appetite. He had thought Jian Wushuang would handle it himself, but it turned out he had hired 2 assassins from the martial world. He found Jian Wushuang increasingly inscrutable, so he decided not to think too much and focused on drinking and eating. It wasn't enjoyable anymore. After everyone had eaten and drunk their fill, darkness fell. But the water reflected the lights. The good show was about to begin. Leading everyone, Jian Wushuang went next door to the Xuexiang Pavilion. Despite its elegant name, it was actually a brothel. However, this brothel was somewhat reserved. It didn't have the kind of women who would accost every passerby. Instead, it had demure ladies who hid their smiles behind flowers. The group entered the Xuexiang Pavilion, crossed an exquisite wooden bridge, and arrived in front of the building. No one came to greet them. Only after they entered did a still charming woman emerge. Her face suggested that she had been a beauty in her youth. Upon seeing Jian Wushuang's group, she glanced at them and then approached Jian Wushuang. "Honored guest, are you here to listen to music or to enjoy the scenery? What's the difference between the 2? Hee, there's a big difference," the beautiful woman said shyly. "One you can only listen to, the other you can only see. Being a hypocrite and pretending to be virtuous, the first of its kind." Tang Eru sneered disdainfully. The beautiful woman was not annoyed by this. Instead, She responded with poise. A song doesn't match the person, and a scene doesn't entice anyone. How could there be a plaque? Interesting. Jian Wushuang smiled lightly and nodded. This wasn't his first time visiting a brothel, but it was his first encounter with such an intriguing madam. He recalled his previous visit to the Great Xia, where he and Bai Junwang had visited brothels together, which were far more lively and less bound by such rigid rules. Cultivators seemed less reserved than these mortals, who were extraordinarily conventional. One ear, preoccupied with tonight's major event, couldn't be bothered to discuss with this beautiful woman and stepped forward directly. All right, take my master to the riverside in the backyard. Money is no issue. Upon hearing this, the beautiful woman knew it was a recommendation from a regular customer. Without further ado, she quoted the price. Entering the riverside in the backyard cost 30 taels of silver per person. For the 5 of them, it was a total of 150 taels. Upon hearing the price, Jian Wushuang thought they were quite reserved. The asking price was simply too steep. He also admired Huang Zhilong's capabilities, not just because of the Huang family's 100,000 good fields, but also the many brothels and inns, which were mostly Huang Zhilong's businesses. In the vast Xianxia town, apart from the poor commoners, the profitable industries were all owned by the Huang family. No wonder Xianxia town was so firmly controlled by the Huang family. After paying the silver, the beautiful woman led them to the riverside in the backyard. Here, there was already music and dancing, with young girls of excellent appearance dancing gracefully, their enchanting sounds stirring the heart. Jian Wushuang and his companions found a place to sit, but did not see Huang Zhilong in the backyard. According to the intelligence, Huang Zhilong would come tonight and always sat in the foremost position. This position was reserved for Huang Zhilong. Perhaps because it was still early, Jian Wushuang didn't mind and joined in, patiently waiting for the fish to bite. After about a quarter of an hour, a commotion was heard outside. Jian Wushuang turned his head and looked in the direction of the noise, seeing a middle-aged man in a yellow mandarin jacket striding in. Several people behind him were scanning the surroundings. This was within Jian Wushuang's expectations, but 2 of them made him frown. Wu Xing and Heinyo. These 2 were from Qingshui Mountain and were here too. It was evident that after that day, they came straight to Xianxia town. The courtyard was not large, making it impossible for him to avoid their gaze. So he stood up and greeted them. Brother Wu, what a coincidence! Wu Xing was also surprised to see him here. After glancing at Huang Zhilong, he quickly walked towards Jian Wushuang. What a coincidence indeed! I didn't expect to meet you here, second in command. Wu Xing greeted politely before turning to introduce Jian Wushuang to Huang Zhilong. Master Huang, this is Jian Wushuang, the second in command of the small dock I mentioned to you. Huang Zhilong, as rumored, appeared modest but was deeply shrewd. I've heard that a great figure emerged from Xianxia town. I never expected to meet you on my territory. It's a great honor. Huang Zhilong's words were courteous. However, both he and Wu Xing were puzzled about why Jian Wushuang was in Xianxia town. Jian Wushuang was also curious about why Wu Xing was in Xianxia town. But it wasn't hard to guess. It was likely because his ambition was too great, leading to a collaboration between Qingshui Mountain and Xianxia town. Fortunately, he was ruthless enough to plan to eliminate Huang Zhilong in advance. Otherwise, once he was free, the other party would have assembled a team of thousands. At that time, without money or food, he couldn't compete with these people. He was also worried about today's plan. It would undoubtedly arouse the other party's suspicion. Why would a small dock second in command come to Xianxia town now? Moreover, to visit a brothel frequented by Huang Zhilong and coincidentally meet here. No one would believe it was just a coincidence. Everyone knew Xianxia town was bustling, and Jian Wushuang, a key figure, wouldn't have the leisure to come here for entertainment, especially since Xianxia town was more than 100 miles away. Even if he rode here, the journey would exhaust his enthusiasm for play. Both sides had their suspicions, but none guessed too far. They all stopped at the surface. Actually, this collaboration between Qingshui Mountain and Master Huang was to take down Jian Wushuang. They were simultaneously preparing to send people to attack Xia Family Town. As long as they took down Xia Family Town, Jian Wushuang would be cornered. No matter how great Jian Wushuang's schemes were, without Xia Family Town, they would be mere words on paper. A single move to defeat the enemy came from Wu Xing. Even Jian Wushuang thought this person had some skill and was by no means an ordinary person. However, seeing Jian Wushuang here at this moment made Wu Xing's mind race. He was also afraid that Jian Wushuang might collaborate with Old Master Huang to deal with Qingshui Mountain. After a brief greeting, Huang Zhilong did not invite Jian Wushuang to the same table. Instead, he took Wu Xing and He Niu to the main seat. He had learned from Wu Xing that Jian Wushuang's swordsmanship was exceptional and that he carried a sword. Getting too close made him uneasy. As soon as Huang Zhilong sat down, he signaled to his subordinate to go back and call more people. Meanwhile, Jian Wushuang also gave one ear a look, signaling to act quickly. They couldn't delay. Otherwise, they would lose the chance to act. He didn't know much about the martial artists of this world and was unaware of the opponent's strength. If they failed, it would be difficult for him to escape today. Although on the surface it had nothing to do with him, a ruthless person like Huang Zhilong would never let a tiger return to the mountain. If he got surrounded, even though he was confident in breaking through, the subsequent plan would fail. At this moment, both sides acted simultaneously. However, Jian Wushuang's side was quicker. The two brothers, Wolf and Coyote, had already sneaked into the Chui Xiong Pavilion and were now waiting for an opportunity. To make the other side act faster, Jian Wushuang personally created this opportunity for them. He raised his eyes and signaled to Tang Eru. Unfortunately, this blockhead was not as perceptive as One Ear. If he had this ability, he wouldn't have ended up as a miscellaneous captain. Jian Wushuang felt a bit helpless and had to attract attention himself. He took a gulp of strong liquor, staggered to his feet, and rushed towards a dancing young woman. "Beauty, aren't you cold wearing so little?" Jian Wushuang teased the brothel woman with extreme disdain. If word of this got out, he wouldn't be able to live it down. But he had no choice but to do this now. Not only did he use words, but he also used his hands. With this commotion, he intended to cause the other side to panic and attract the attention of Huang Zhilong and others, making it easier for the Wolf brothers to act. Unexpectedly, when he grabbed the girl in the thin veil, she did not resist. Instead, she fell into his arms, her cheeks blushing shyly. "Why is this different from what I expected?" Jian Wushuang felt a bit panicked inside. He had thought the girl would resist or at least scream. He was careless and made a mistake because he forgot that he was bearing a face that could make any ordinary woman fall for him. Fortunately, it wasn't his fault. He could only awkwardly hold the beauty in his arms and return to his seat. As soon as he sat down, his expression darkened. "If you can't relax here, you can go upstairs." The girl leaning against Jian Wushuang's chest whispered in a voice as soft as a mosquito. Jian Wushuang wiped his face, wondering what kind of mess he had gotten himself into. Just then, a sudden thunderclap exploded in the sky. Everyone looked up in unison to see a firework blooming. But what they didn't know was that at the same moment, Huang Zhilong, who was sitting in the main seat, also blossomed, except his flower was blood red. "Murder!" A startled cry drew everyone's attention to Huang Zhilong. They saw Huang Zhilong clutching his neck, blood pouring out. This scene terrified the young girls, and some guests turned pale with fright, wanting to flee the courtyard. Chaos ensued. Jian Wushuang and the others stood up as well. The real show was about to begin, and they already had a scapegoat. Someone shouted to catch the assassin, prompting Huang Zhilong's retainers to draw their swords and surround everyone. At this moment, One Ear shouted, "I just saw it. That big black guy did it. Avenge Ninth Master quickly. Kill him for me." Among Huang Zhilong's retainers, a slender middle-aged man drew his knife and charged. Where there was one leader, there would be others. One Ear's accusation, combined with the retainer's identification, immediately put Wu Xing and Black Bull in the middle of the siege. "You're full of crap," Black Bull erupted. Wu Xing, beside him, turned pale as well. He clearly hadn't anticipated such a turn of events. It was obvious even without thinking. They had been framed by Jian Wushuang and his group. But he had no way to defend himself now. If they left immediately, they would be hunted by the Huang family. Even if they escaped, it would bring trouble to Qingshui Mountain. If they stayed, they would fall right into Jian Wushuang's trap. While Wu Xing hesitated, the Huang family's retainers had already surrounded the courtyard. As for the real culprits, they had long left. The Wolf brothers were quick in their actions. They didn't give the Huang family's retainers a chance. Now, only Jian Wushuang's group and Wu Xing's pair were left. Brother Fang, listen to me. Someone is framing us. Don't forget that I'm here representing Qingshui Mountain today. Wu Xing remained calm, knowing they couldn't resort to violence, and quickly tried to stop the confrontation. The Huang family's top retainer, Fang Qingxin, drew his gleaming blade, his eyes filled with anger and sorrow. How can I believe you? He hadn't clearly seen who made the move, but his own people claimed it was Black Bull. He couldn't just ignore it. Soon, several of Huang Zhilong's sons arrived. Seeing their father dead, they were at a loss whether to be sad or not. Each was caught off guard. But they quickly understood one thing. Whoever avenged their father could take over the Huang family. Hearing it was Qingshui Mountain, they rushed at Wu Xing and Black Bull without considering the consequences. Fang Qingxin, being an experienced retainer, knew something was off and hurried to stop the young masters. But at this moment, the sons of Huang Zhilong couldn't care less and ignored Fang Qingxin. Previously suppressed by these retainers, they now didn't want to heed them since their father was gone. Fang Qingxin, our family has treated you well. Now the murderer of our father stands there, and you not only refuse to avenge him but also stop us. Could it be that you're colluding with them? The younger generation of the Huang family had eyes full of suspicion. Some even thought it might have been done by one of their own brothers. To them, the truth was irrelevant. Killing the enemy and rising to power was the clear choice. Seeing the chaotic scene, Jian Wushuang waved his hand, signaling the others to leave first to avoid drawing more suspicion and being falsely accused. Only Tang Eru stayed with him. Wu Xing and He Niu stood back to back, now forced into action. Among the crowd, he glanced at Jian Wushuang with a look of fury and apprehension. If he threw dirt on Jian Wushuang now, he could drag him into the fray. But he didn't do that, because he knew if Jian Wushuang dared to act this way, he must have a backup plan. The only chance for survival now was to cooperate with Jian Wushuang. Wu Xing immediately shouted, "Brother Wushuang, everything's done. It's not good to just stand by and watch the joke, right?" By saying this, he was both cooperating with Jian Wushuang and pulling him into the fray. It all depended on what Jian Wushuang would do. In fact, Jian Wushuang had anticipated this, so he let one ear take the others and leave first. He had come today to take over Xianxia town. Merely watching the show wasn't enough. "It seems I'll have to make a move." Jian Wushuang raised his hand, drew his sword, and charged out, first killing Fang Qingxin. This guy was deeply rooted in the Huang family and was on the list to be eliminated. Seeing him take action, Wu Xing and He Niu also took the opportunity to strike back. Anyway, they were already tainted, so they didn't mind more blood. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's men, who had been set up outside, also rushed in. They hacked at the Huang family's guests indiscriminately. After one incense stick's worth of time, the backyard had turned into hell. Corpses and blood mixed together on the ground. Jian Wushuang and Tang Eru were covered in blood, as were Wu Xing and He Niu. These two had considerable martial prowess, especially He Niu, whom Jian Wushuang had experienced firsthand. Second in command, the cavalry has also arrived. We can head to the Huang family any time, One Ear said as he walked in after everyone had fallen. Okay, let Wang take charge, Jian Wushuang said calmly. Now, although the Huang family still had hundreds of guests, Huang Zhilong was dead. Fang Qingxin was dead too. The younger generation competing for power in the Huang family were also dead. Those guests had no master to serve. Wang Luan was just right to go. As for the scapegoat, Qingshui Mountain would take the blame. Brother Wu, are you going back to Qingshui Mountain now? Or coming with me to Sha Family Town to form the Coastal Guard? I have no choice. Wuxing smiled bitterly. Now that he was implicated in cooperating with Jian Wushuang to kill Huang Zhilong, returning to Qingshui Mountain would surely arouse suspicion. He Niu beside him hadn't reacted yet. He was the most confused right now. How did they suddenly join the small dock? But things had come to this point, and since he had been following Wuxing, it wasn't appropriate to ask openly. Jian Wushuang left the subsequent matters for Wang Luan to handle. This was also a time to build prestige. It was useless to him, but extremely beneficial to Wang Luan. So he had to do it personally. Jian Wushuang then took Wuxing and He Niu back to Sha Family Dock. They began preparing for the training at Qingshu Town in 2 days. With Wuxing's addition, Jian Wushuang no longer needed to handle the smaller details. He only needed to stay stationed at the rear. All other matters were entrusted to Wuxing and Wang Luan. 2 days passed in a flash. Xianxia Town was taken, and Wuxing even wrote to Qingshui Mountain to persuade them to surrender. With Qingshui Mountain captured, the entire Binhai County would essentially be under their control. This was the escape route for the Jiang Kingdom. If they controlled it, the first to panic would be the aristocrats of Jiang Kingdom. But at this moment they had yet to realize this. Even Yongqing's reaction was minimal. But soon they would witness a new force rising. 2 days later, Jian Wushuang personally led 5,000 carefully selected young men to Qingshu Town, bringing Xianxia along as well. He still wanted to see if Xing Luo was in this place. If so, there might be a chance to draw him out. Unfortunately, it was wishful thinking. Even the grand wedding a month later couldn't lure Xing Luo out. Jian Wushuang completely abandoned the thought, and even Xianxia gave up hope. Binding closely with Instructor Yang, he was especially attentive to training the troops, as this could be considered his own force now. In just 1 month, the 5,000 young men became 5,000 guards. Although they hadn't yet developed much combat power, the reported number was quite impressive. Qingshui Mountain, which had been hesitant, directly switched sides. Henceforth, the small dock no longer existed. It was replaced by the Binhai Guards. Successfully taking over the bandits from Qingshui Mountain bolstered their ranks again. Now, whether it was military affairs or the plan to capture Yongqing, Jian Wushuang didn't need to personally handle anything. This allowed him to enjoy some leisure. In the past, he might have been in seclusion, but now he could only stay indoors reading. He read various ancient books collected from all over. Particularly, he didn't miss any strange and mysterious stories. Among them, he found many interesting things. Candle Dragon Mountain, a towering mountain 100 miles west of Binhai County, rumored to have had a candle dragon appear there. Candle Dragon, a beast god that appeared in every material world, was considered a clan with extremely powerful bloodlines. The appearance of a candle dragon indicated that this place had some treasure attracting it. With nothing better to do, Jian Wushuang decided to go and see. Now the Binhai Guards were on the right track. With Xianxia Town as a major granary, they could continuously gather people. They had already taken in over 30,000 refugees, and the second batch of young men gathered over 8,000 people. Every month, they would send a batch of people. By the end of the year, it might really be possible to have 30 to 50,000 troops, though it was unfortunate they had no war horses, otherwise they could form a cavalry unit. Unfortunately, Binhai County was mostly surrounded by mountains, unsuitable for raising horses, making cavalry difficult to deploy, so they didn't bother further. All they wanted was an impressive number, using this as leverage to approach that little Liang king. As for Xianxia, he had now integrated into the mortal world. Jian Wushuang didn't remind him. Being able to blend into the mortal world was quite good. Perhaps it was thanks to that mortal woman. The next morning, Jian Wushuang had a batch of fast horses prepared and left Qingshu Town alone. He galloped all the way toward Candle Dragon Mountain. A journey of 100 miles took him nearly 5 hours, arriving at the range of Candle Dragon Mountain in the late afternoon. Today, he couldn't explore the mountain, so he looked for a nearby village to rest for the night. However, after searching for a long time, he couldn't find a place to stay. The surroundings were overgrown with weeds and intertwined with shrubs. With no other option and the sky darkening, he found a flat ground to rest for the night. As night fell, there were frequent sounds from the bushes. Jian Wushuang lit a fire. Though the weather wasn't cold, it was a bit chilly, and the campfire was mainly to ward off wild animals and satisfy his hunger. He had hurriedly left without bringing any rations, and his stomach growled painfully in the middle of the night. Fortunately, in the still of the night, he heard the sound of flowing water, likely from a small stream running down the mountain. Jian Wushuang grabbed a torch and followed the sound. He intended to catch some fish to fill his stomach. But as he prepared to put the torch down and enter the water, he saw a white figure floating in the stream. Seeing this at night gave Jian Wushuang quite a scare. Despite having experienced quite a lot, now as a mere mortal, accompanied by the howling of wild beasts in this desolate stream, Jian Wushuang couldn't help but feel a tremor in his heart upon seeing a pale human figure. Shivering, he quickly returned to the shore. The body floating in the water drifted downstream with the current. Taking a deep breath, his hunger dissipated. It seems she's not dead. Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered, and he went back into the water to pull the body ashore. When he dragged it to the shore, he realized it was a woman. However, she was dressed in men's clothing. Without thinking too much about it, he carried her on his shoulder and returned to the campfire. Seeing her swollen belly, he knew she had swallowed a lot of water. There is an old saying among mortals: saving a life is more meritorious than building a 7-story pagoda. Jian Wushuang, now a mortal, could not escape this belief. Saving her life was something he could do without much loss to himself. Placing the woman flat on the grass, he pressed her chest a few times. The woman in white immediately coughed, spitting out water and grass. Spitting out the water was a good sign for survival. By the light of the campfire, Jian Wushuang looked at her pale face, feeling a sense of familiarity but unable to recall her name. Her appearance was pleasing to his eye. After repeating the process several times, her swollen belly finally subsided. Jian Wushuang moved her closer to the campfire to keep her warm, then leaned against a rock, holding his sword and half closing his eyes, waiting for dawn. The long night was peaceful. At dawn, Jian Wushuang went to the stream early to wash up and caught a few grass carp hiding in the crevices of the rocks, planning to grill them for breakfast. When he returned to the still smoldering campfire with the fish, he found that the woman in white had woken up. Moreover, she had just taken off her top and was drying her clothes by the remaining fire. Seeing her exposed back, Jian Wushuang was momentarily stunned, dropping the fish in his hand. Hearing the noise, the woman quickly turned her head. Seeing him, she widened her eyes and hastily covered her chest with her clothes, a sharp look in her eyes. Seeing the man in front of her staring at her foolishly, the woman in white became furious. She immediately stood up and shouted angrily, "If you dare look again, I'll gouge out your eyes." She clenched her hands, and the stones on the ground flew into her hands. She casually threw one, hitting Jian Wushuang in the chest. Jian Wushuang didn't have time to react and was knocked to the ground. Yet he still wanted to lift his head to look, because on the other person's back, Jian Wushuang saw a totem. It was a tree that had been awe-inspiring for ages, the Wanlu divine tree. He would never forget it. That was why he was so surprised and kept staring. The woman in white had no idea and thought Jian Wushuang was lustful. "So, is this all you're capable of?" The woman in white sneered. Jian Wushuang, clutching his chest with one hand, ignored the pain and asked urgently, "How did you get the Wanlu divine tree on your back?" Given her methods, she was no ordinary person and must have some connection to the divine tree. "You recognize it?" The woman in white raised her eyebrows. She hadn't expected the man in front of her to recognize the mysterious willow on her back. "Answer my question first," Jian Wushuang demanded. This took the woman in white by surprise. An ordinary mortal dared to speak to her this way, eliciting a sneer. "You have no say here." The woman in white pulled a small wooden tube from her waist and shot a red beam into the sky. Soon, hoofbeats sounded from afar. Jian Wushuang, now recovering, didn't know the woman's identity, but he knew if he fell into her hands, he would likely be tortured. Taking advantage of the fact that the group hadn't arrived yet, he rolled into the shrubbery. The woman in white wanted to pursue him but was struck in the chest, spitting blood, revealing she was also injured. The hoofbeats drew nearer. Upon seeing the woman in white, the riders quickly dismounted, respectfully saying, "Your Majesty, search the area. Find him. Yes. Remember, we need him alive." Understood. The group abandoned their horses and, armed with swords, charged into the bushes. The woman in white's eyes flickered with suspicion and surprise. Clearly, the man was an ordinary mortal, yet he recognized the mysterious willow on her back, undoubtedly connected to her origins. She had to capture Jian Wushuang. After giving orders to her subordinates, she mounted a fast horse and left Candle Dragon Mountain with a few others. She had more important matters to attend to. Jian Wushuang, meanwhile, was in trouble. He ran through the shrubs deep into Candle Dragon Mountain, but couldn't shake off his pursuers. These people were formidable, not like bandits or ruffians, and definitely not martial artists from the underworld. Jian Wushuang was curious about their identity, so he intentionally left flaws for them to split up in their pursuit. He then seized the opportunity to capture one of them. Pressing the blade against the captive's neck, Jian Wushuang asked in a low voice, "Who is that woman in white? Tell me, and I might spare your life." "Dream on." The captive slit his own throat, catching Jian Wushuang off guard. Fearless of death, and such martial prowess. Jian Wushuang's curiosity about their identity deepened, but he couldn't investigate now and had to hide in Candle Dragon Mountain alone. By nightfall, he finally shook them off. He entered the desolate Candle Dragon Mountain, which was easy to get lost in due to its complex terrain. Fortunately, his sense of direction was good, and he moved slowly up the mountain. His stomach growled, but he couldn't find any food. After enduring the night, he descended the mountain and left the Candle Dragon Mountain range from another direction. He headed towards Xianxia Mountain. Though his journey to Candle Dragon Mountain yielded no tangible results, seeing the Wanlu divine tree on the woman's back confirmed that this world was connected to Wanlu, and possibly to the prophet. Recalling his previous dream, he became even more certain. This world was connected to the Wanlu divine tree, the prophet, and him. He knew the prophet, who had helped him many times, and the Wanlu divine tree, which had been taken by Weiss but now appeared here. He had entered the Wanlu divine tree and obtained his path to enlightenment there. Its appearance in this world was likely related to him, but now, as a mortal, he couldn't explore its mysteries. This made him even more eager to return to his path of cultivation. Only by regaining his strength could he uncover the secrets here. So, when he arrived at Xianxia Mountain, he remained mysterious. Heinyo guarded this place. There were also 3,000 newly trained soldiers. All of them were under the command of Heinyo. These 3,000 men, each wielding a mountain-splitting axe. They were most suited for close combat. They were also prepared to resist the troops from Yong City. Right now, there were still thousands of government soldiers in Yong City, so they couldn't be careless. Seeing him alone and looking mysterious, Heinyo approached and asked, "I heard you went to Candle Dragon Mountain. What's going on? Why are you so down? Did someone bully you? You wouldn't understand." Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly and changed the topic. "How have things been lately? What's the situation on Yong City's side? Are they just watching us grow?" Currently, in Binhai County, almost every town had their people. The mountain lords from before had now taken over the major towns in their respective territories, each commanding their own troops. If all the Binhai guards were counted, they had already exceeded 10,000 men. Moreover, the official roads between the towns had also been taken over. Yong City had now become an isolated city. Although the people below hadn't spoken of rebellion, they all practiced passive resistance, not obeying commands. They were probably as anxious as ants on a hot pan right now. Don't even mention it. A few days ago, some dignitaries from Yong City came to offer money, saying that in the future, they would make it easier for us on the waterways and official roads. As long as their merchant ships could sail smoothly, they wouldn't care how Binhai County was being tossed around. Hearing Heinyo's answer, Jian Wushuang also laughed. It was just as he had guessed, only faster than he had imagined. He had initially thought the other side would offer to surrender and pacify them, certainly not send troops to suppress them. Now it seemed they had skipped the surrendering part and went straight to negotiating cooperation. But now that they wanted to talk, they were no longer willing to. They continued to seize the passing merchant ships, forcing Yong City to have to change their route. But changing routes made the journey slow, and the waves were big, making it easy for ships to sink. But these matters had nothing to do with Jian Wushuang, and he couldn't be bothered to deal with them. At noon, Qingshui Mountain killed chickens and sheep, giving Jian Wushuang a good feast. Having starved on the mountain for several days, Jian Wushuang did not hold back, eating meat and drinking wine with gusto. The matters weighing on his mind were also put aside. He felt that those issues couldn't be rushed. Delaying a day or two was nothing. In the outside world, a single retreat could last millions of epochs. He could afford to wait for this short time. What he was anxious about was his cultivation. In the gathering hall of Qingshui Mountain, while he was drinking with Hainyo, an urgent report suddenly came from outside. The nearby official road had people passing by. A group of them had killed quite a few of their brothers. Moreover, their actions were ruthless, showing no mercy. When Hainyo heard this, he immediately glared and swung his axe angrily, saying, "Lead the way. I will personally meet these people. How dare they come to Qingshui Mountain and act wild? They must be tired of living." "Wait a moment." Jian Wushuang grabbed Hainyo, turned to the scout who reported, and asked, "From which direction did they come?" Those who dared to kill people from Qingshui Mountain so recklessly could not be from Binhai County. Everyone in Binhai County knew that Qingshui Mountain was the territory of the Binhai Guards. Even the nobility of Yongqing didn't dare to offend them. They feared a direct attack on their city. Who would dare to kill them? So the attackers must be outsiders. This place was not close to the waterways. The outsiders must have come by water. Most people who traveled by land came from Yongqing. It was impossible for the people from Yongqing to make a move against those from Qingshui Mountain. So there was only one possibility: the group that had been chasing him earlier at Candle Dragon Mountain. When he heard they came from the direction of Candle Dragon Mountain, he was even more certain. "I'll go with you." Hainyo waved his hand and said, "No need. This is a small matter. I can handle it myself. You won't be able to deal with them." Jian Wushuang shook his head. Immediately, the two of them set off together, taking 500 axemen and 200 cavalry to give chase. To be on the safe side, he also sent word to notify some nearby allies. These were the mountain lords they had pacified earlier. All of them went out in full force. 1,000 men went to encircle that group. Unfortunately, by the time they reached the official road, the group had long disappeared. After asking around, they found out that one of the white-clothed experts had slaughtered an entire mountain of people and then traveled by water to Yongqing. There was no need to ask to know that this white-clothed person was the woman he had rescued, the one with the Wanlu divine tree behind her. This person was not ordinary. She had a unique way of using qi. He had personally seen her use her palm to attract a stone from the ground into her hand. Actually, this had nothing to do with cultivation because in Jian Wushuang's view, unless one became a Tao ancestor, they weren't considered a cultivator. He didn't understand the cultivation rules of this world yet, so he thought this way. If what he said was true, that one must become a Tao ancestor to be considered a cultivator, then perhaps there were no cultivators in this world yet. After the failed attempt to encircle the mysterious group, Jian Wushuang returned to Qingshan town. He didn't tell Xiangyang about what had happened because Xiangyang didn't know about the Wanlu divine tree, so telling him would be useless. He stayed indoors by himself. Anyway, now there were people to handle both major and minor matters. He wasn't worried about being marginalized. After all, Xiangyang was keeping an eye on things. Time flew by and it was already the new year. On the first day of the new year, many people came to visit. Jian Wushuang greeted each one of them. By evening, when only he and Xiangyang were left, they talked about the recent events. In a blink, they had been in this world for more than half a year. Now, the Binhai Guards had developed rapidly, already numbering 50,000 men. Their combat power wasn't exceptionally high, but this number alone was enough to intimidate people. As for the current nobility of Yongqing, most of them had already fled. They feared they wouldn't be able to escape if there was an attack on Yongqing. As for the stationed officials and soldiers, they had almost all become their people. Whenever there was an order from the court, it was delivered to Qingshan town immediately. This also saved Jian Wushuang and his group the trouble of sending people to attack. They directly let Wu Xing lead his men to take over Yong City. After the new year, everyone discussed moving into Yong City together, effectively taking control of the entire Binhai County. However, these matters weren't very important to Jian Wushuang and Xiangyang. "Shouldn't we take the next step?" Xiangyang said calmly while sipping tea. "I know your plan. We use our current leverage to cooperate with the little Liang King and learn his cultivation methods." Jian Wushuang was initially a bit surprised, then teased. "You seem to be living quite comfortably these days. I thought you'd forgotten about this matter. Why not just live in this world? Why go out? With your aptitude, becoming a universe god is a long shot. Even if you become one, you'd only be a 3-star at most, which isn't a super strong figure on the realm god continent. In this world, things are different. You might even become an emperor. Give me a break. The life of a mortal starts with passion but turns into torment over time." Xiangyang shook his head helplessly. "Indeed, the life of a mortal is like this, starting full of passion but eventually becoming mundane, facing death directly. You bring nothing at birth and take nothing at death. Everything is an illusion." They understood this when they became celestial beings. How could they fall into the trap of mortal life? The two chatted for a long time. Both had a burning determination in their hearts. A few days later, everyone moved to Yong City with their families. They stayed there for almost half a year. As summer arrived, the situation in Wolf Mountain County became increasingly tense. Meanwhile, they focused on their own development, ignoring worldly affairs. Their forces had grown to 100,000 troops, well-rested and eager for action. The Jiang Kingdom's court could no longer ignore their presence and started probing Wang Luan's intentions. An imperial edict of amnesty. Besides the Jiang Kingdom's amnesty, there was also a letter from the little Liang King of the Yu Kingdom. This wasn't an amnesty. It was a demand for surrender, and it had a commanding tone. In the main hall of Yong City, Jian Wushuang's group sat in 2 rows. It resembled a royal court. At this moment, they were in a heated argument. According to Jian Wushuang's initial strategy, they were to surrender to the little Liang King. But now, with their military strength, their ambitions couldn't be suppressed. Led by Wu Xing, the radical faction believed they could conquer the world and didn't need to rely on anyone. Tai Mian Liang Chun advocated surrendering to the little Liang King. Currently, they could only maintain a force of 100,000. Any more and they couldn't afford it. They didn't have the strength. Conquering the world required resources. Once Jiang Kingdom fell, they wouldn't be able to withstand the Yu Kingdom's army. Wang Luan believed they should rely on Jiang Kingdom to resist the Yu Kingdom, thus becoming a minister of the dragon. His ambition was the smallest, yet the most prudent. Relying on the Yu Kingdom would be fruitless. But relying on the Jiang Kingdom was different. The Jiang Kingdom needed their forces now. Seeing the argument going nowhere, the silent Xiangyang spoke to Jian Wushuang. "Brother Wushuang, I think you should make the decision." Everyone fell silent and turned to look at Jian Wushuang. The Binhai Guard's current scale was largely due to Jian Wushuang's early planning and bold actions. The initial strategy was also set by Jian Wushuang. So naturally, they wanted to hear Jian Wushuang's opinion. Xiangyang's suggestion was also to let Jian Wushuang decide. The first choice was naturally little Liang King. The other party was likely a practitioner, and taking refuge with them could lead both of them onto the path of cultivation. However, it seemed that the other party didn't take them seriously at all. Even if they sought refuge, now was not the time. They needed to increase their bargaining chips first. But now they had reached a bottleneck in their development, and to progress further they had to go to Langshan County. First, they would submit to the Jiang Kingdom, demonstrate their usefulness, increase their bargaining chips, and then negotiate conditions with little Liang King. This was the only plan Jian Wushuang could think of. He couldn't openly share this with everyone. Once he did, morale would plummet. He knew that once these people learned the truth, they would undoubtedly become complacent, and if they failed to deliver results, they would squander their existing bargaining chips, resulting in a loss. At that point, he and Xianxia would be left dumbfounded. However, they had also planned a backup route which was to head to the Eastern Tang dynasty. That was the pinnacle of the dynasty and a place frequented by practitioners. If all else failed, they would simply abandon their posts and flee. After pondering for a moment, Jian Wushuang said, "Some things change over time. Initially, I suggested allying with Little Liang King because I believed we were useful to the Yu Kingdom, but now, as you all have seen, they don't take us seriously. Moreover, we are all from Jiang Kingdom. Even if surrendering could bring peace, what use would it be? Eventually, we would face retribution. What do you suggest?" Iron-faced Liangqin looked at Jian Wushuang. Everyone else was watching as well. Except for Iron-faced Liangqin, everyone else was concerned with their own interests. Whether it was the mountain lords, the people of Qingshui Mountain, or Wang Luan and Yang Zixing, they were all concerned about their own futures. Who won or lost was irrelevant. Collaborate with the Jiang Kingdom and send troops to Langshan County. I will personally go to the royal city of the Jiang Kingdom to negotiate with them. This statement left everyone stunned. They hadn't expected him to be so decisive. Sending troops directly, isn't that a bit too fast? Wang Luan hesitated. The others were even more reluctant. Especially Iron-faced Liangchen, who advocated taking refuge with Little Liang King, exclaimed, "Brother Wushuang, have you considered how many people will die if we ally with the Jiang Kingdom?" "Die!" Jian Wushuang sneered. "There's no war without casualties. Moreover, we are doing this to resist the Yu Kingdom, which is understandable. If we're afraid of death, we might as well disband early." These words left everyone speechless. He realized that these people had grown complacent after some stability and had become somewhat timid. Fortunately, most people agreed with this proposal. Finally, a vote was held, and most people sided with Jian Wushuang. The matter of recruitment was finally settled. The next step was to integrate personnel and march on Langshan County. In doing so, they put pressure on both the Jiang Kingdom and Little Liang King. Jian Wushuang was preparing to take Xianxia to the royal city. There was no need for people from the royal city to come. He would personally meet the current emperor of the Jiang Kingdom. 3 days later, he and Xianxia, with the farewell of the crowd, set sail for the Jiang Kingdom. This time, they didn't bring many people. Only one ear and a few skilled individuals were responsible for protecting them, while the others stayed behind to prepare for the army's departure. After all, this hadn't been discussed with the Jiang Kingdom yet. They needed to wait. Once Jian Wushuang negotiated with the Jiang Kingdom, they could make a decision. Otherwise, if they went ahead, they would starve. The logistics and transport of provisions would require an enormous amount of manpower. Binhai County didn't have that many people available. Therefore, he needed the Jiang Kingdom to send people to assist, at least to handle the logistics. These were essential conditions. This time, he came to negotiate. After sailing for 3 to 5 days, they arrived at Jiangning County, the wealthiest county in the heart of the Jiang Kingdom. The royal city was also situated next to Jiangning. As soon as Jian Wushuang and his companions disembarked from the ship, they were greeted by a squad of elite cavalry. His name had already spread throughout the royal city. A bandit with an army of 100,000 was no longer just a bandit. Even if he didn't call himself the Coastal Defense Army, others would bestow him with a title. The official in charge of welcoming them, a second-rank officer, personally attended to them. Jian Wushuang and his companions were accommodated in a luxurious courtyard designated for foreign emissaries. That evening, the official brought along various high-ranking officials to host a banquet in their honor. Jian Wushuang did not stand on ceremony. He accepted their flattery and received the gifts that were offered to him. He had to do so in order to gain more advantages. After the banquet, they finally got down to business. After bidding farewell to the other high-ranking officials, the second-rank officer, Li Mi, stayed behind. The two of them leisurely drank tea in the pavilion and Jian Wushuang changed the topic to inquire about the thoughts of the one in the imperial palace. Seeing him initiate the serious conversation, Li Mi's expression became solemn. There are some things I must speak frankly about. This time, regarding the emperor's edict to pacify your coastal defense army. There have been some voices of opposition, Li Mi said calmly. Upon hearing about the opposition, Jian Wushuang laughed. Looking at Li Mi, he found the other quite amusing. Opposition? Could it be that some are advocating surrender to the Yu Kingdom? The Yu Kingdom had invaded the state of Jiang with the claim of annihilating it. What benefit would surrender bring? None at all, only exile overseas. Li Mi spoke bluntly. Yes, and there are quite a few, though they can't be killed off completely. Then they must oppose the conditions I proposed, right? Jian Wushuang found the man somewhat untruthful. He hadn't even made any excessive demands yet, but it seemed like he was already making enemies. The key issue was whether these people were genuinely intent on surrendering or just using this as leverage against him. That's why he spoke this way. There will indeed be voices of opposition, but you don't need to worry. The matter of the pacification will be decided by the Protectorate Office. Tomorrow you will meet the Emperor, receive your title, and the conditions you propose will also be agreed upon by the Protectorate Office. However, there is one thing you need to do. Hearing the straightforwardness of the other party, he couldn't help but furrow his brows and asked, "What thing?" "Killing." Li Mi raised his head, his eyes deep and penetrating. Upon hearing this, Jian Wushuang became even more puzzled. He had just entered the royal city and was being asked to kill. He frowned, pondering whether there was a trap. He couldn't let himself be fooled by the other party. "My strength, you should know, and I only brought a few people this time. I really don't understand what you mean." Jian Wushuang didn't respond directly but subtly indicated his inability to perform the task. Li Mi wasn't in a hurry and continued, "I've already investigated your influence. In the coastal prefecture, you can practically cover the sky with one hand, and you've made great contributions, so there's no need to be so modest. But that's in the coastal prefecture. This is the royal city. Precisely because of that, you need to do it. Once you do, the emperor will be assured, and you will become one of us." Li Mi's justified words left Jian Wushuang silent once again. Finally, he asked, "Who should I kill?" "Princess." Li Mi stood up immediately after speaking. Jian Wushuang did not see him off. He remained seated in the pavilion. He finally understood now. The imperial edict was not to resist the Yu Kingdom but to use his strength to eliminate dissent within the court. The Jiang Kingdom was truly finished. Luckily, he hadn't genuinely pledged allegiance to the Jiang Kingdom, or he would have been doomed alongside these people sooner or later. The next day, Jian Wushuang got up early to enter the palace. He went alone, with no one accompanying him. Today's visit to the palace was merely for a conferment of rewards. The real matters needed to be discussed privately. Upon entering the palace, a eunuch guided him to the court hall. Today's morning assembly had most people discussing him. When he entered, they all looked at him. Jian Wushuang felt no pressure as he stepped into the hall, bowing neither humbly nor arrogantly. He did not kneel. This was seized upon by those opposed to the imperial edict as a handle against him, immediately rebuking him and assigning him a string of charges. Jian Wushuang snorted with a sneer, retorting, "I am here to protect the Jiang Kingdom, but what about you? You wish to see the Jiang Kingdom perish." Though none of them were truly virtuous, at least he cared about his reputation. These people didn't even care about that. They advocated surrendering to the Yu Kingdom with pompous arguments, which was simply laughable. Being confronted like this, the faces of many court officials turned red. At this moment, the Emperor of Jiang, seated on high, spoke. It was just a word of appeasement, but it made Jian Wushuang frown. He directly raised his head to look at the young Emperor of Jiang. He was shocked at what he saw. In his mind, he instantly thought of the woman in white he had encountered at Candle Dragon Mountain. Although he hadn't noticed anything initially, but voices don't lie. Due to the rules of the court, he couldn't directly gaze at the Emperor at first glance. Now, taking a closer look, he recognized her. The other party certainly recognized him too, but she did not speak. Jian Wushuang was thrown into chaos. He even ignored his own conferment of rewards, until the words "dismiss the court" were spoken, and Li Mi pulled him. Did he come to his senses? Leaving the palace, he got into Li Mi's carriage. Only then did he calm down. "Lord Li, there is something I wish to ask." "Speak freely." Li Mi responded straightforwardly. Jian Wushuang was even more straightforward. He asked a question that would cause those ministers to panic. "Is the Emperor of Jiang actually a woman?" As soon as he said this, Li Mi was stunned. He hurriedly reached out to cover Jian Wushuang's mouth. It was evident that he knew the inside story. Otherwise, such an important matter as the imperial edict would not have been entrusted to Li Mi to handle. He must have been a confidant of the young emperor. "Discuss this at my residence." Li Mi's tone was uncharacteristically stern at this moment. When he looked at Jian Wushuang, there was a hint of killing intent. Jian Wushuang could feel this killing intent. Once inside the residence, Li Mi said nothing, taking him directly to a secluded courtyard. In the courtyard, there was a bamboo grove, creating a tranquil atmosphere. Li Mi then turned his head to look at him. "How did you discover this matter?" "You should ask that young emperor." Jian Wushuang stood with his hands behind his back, a soft sword hanging at his waist. If the other party dared to turn hostile, he would take Li Mi's head first and then lead his men back to Binhai County. Li Mi wasn't angered by his reference to the current emperor and said sternly, "You'd better keep this matter to yourself or you'll surely die." His words didn't sound like a threat, but more like a statement of fact. Yet, the situation was quite amusing. An emperor on the brink of losing his country turned out to be a woman. Jian Wushuang looked up at Li Mi and calmly said, "Even if I keep it a secret, that young emperor won't spare me." Li Mi was somewhat surprised by his statement. But before he could ask further, someone outside reported that the emperor had summoned Jian Wushuang to the palace. "You know the emperor? I've met once." "No wonder you know the emperor's identity. But don't worry, as long as you keep this secret and kill the eldest princess, you'll be one of us, and the emperor won't trouble you." Li Mi spoke with confidence, thinking this was merely a power struggle. However, Jian Wushuang saw further. This wasn't just a feud within the royal family. It was a conspiracy among cultivators. The enmity between the current emperor and the eldest princess wasn't as simple as a fight for the throne. Jian Wushuang patted Li Mi's shoulder and said, "Help me pass a message to Xianxia. Tell him not to wait for me, and if I die, spare him." "Is it that serious?" Li Mi became somewhat flustered. If the emperor truly killed Jian Wushuang, the 100,000 troops in Binhai County would rebel. At that time, the collapse of the dynasty would be disastrous for the royal family. Jian Wushuang didn't bother explaining anything further and simply left the small courtyard. He followed the eunuch who delivered the decree and re-entered the imperial palace. However, this time they didn't use the main gate but a side entrance. From there, they headed directly into the depths of the palace. Jian Wushuang followed behind the eunuch, lost in thought. He was taking a gamble. Actually, once he recognized the other's identity, he couldn't leave anymore. He could only face it head-on. He wasn't sure if his luck was good or bad. He wanted to see the other person but feared that person wouldn't trust him. Thus, he was torn. After walking for a while, they stopped in front of a large hall. The palace eunuch turned to Jian Wushuang and said, "Please wait here for a moment. I will go and announce your arrival." "Thank you, steward." Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. The chief eunuch went inside to report, and then led him in. However, the eunuch did not follow inside. Only Jian Wushuang walked in alone. The entire hall had a unique fragrance, evoking a sense of reverie. Standing at the center, Jian Wushuang glanced around but did not see the emperor of the Jiang kingdom. He didn't rush to speak, just stood there waiting. After a while, the screen automatically folded, revealing the emperor of the Jiang kingdom behind it. Jian Wushuang turned his head to look and met the other's gaze. "We meet again." The young emperor smiled faintly. No one would have expected such a coincidence. Initially, with a tentative attitude, He went to Candle Dragon Mountain and ended up encountering the emperor of the Jiang Kingdom. A coincidence or intentional? Jian Wushuang couldn't be sure it was accidental. Because this world was controllable. If you have something to say, just say it directly, Jian Wushuang said calmly. He didn't want to waste words and wanted to be straightforward. After all, this was a mortal world, and there was nothing that couldn't be said. The Wanlu divine wood was once a precious treasure to him, but now, it was no longer important. He only wanted to leave, and once he was out, it would be easy to find out why the Wanlu divine would appeared here. But now he had no choice but to speak. The emperor of the Jiang Kingdom was writing something at the moment, not in a hurry, and said in a calm tone, "I'm quite curious. You went from a dock worker to conquering the entire Binhai County and even formed some coastal guards all in just half a year. That's not something an ordinary person can achieve." Indeed, Jian Wushuang had no identity in this mortal world. He was just an ordinary person. However, he was able to create an army of hundreds of thousands in a short period of time. This indeed made people doubt his ability. Moreover, he was very young at this time. He looked to be only in his early 20s. He was not even as big as the emperor of the Jiang Kingdom in front of him. Jian Wushuang's heart skipped a beat as he guessed the other party's thoughts. "You're right. I'm not an ordinary person." Upon hearing this, the emperor of the Jiang Kingdom was stunned. He stopped writing and looked at Jian Wushuang with deep eyes. "But you're not a Xianxia." Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently. "Would you believe me if I said that my power was taken away?" "Yes," the emperor of Jiang Kingdom answered with a serious face, which made Jian Wushuang solemn. This was a little different from what he had imagined. He felt that he would be treated like a carrot and would be squeezed dry by the other party. However, now, he felt that the other party seemed to be a mortal who had not been born for long. Perhaps he was too sensitive, seeing all cultivators as evil people. He had no choice. After cultivating for so long, he had seen too much. He had done it before. Not to mention this. In order to cultivate, many people had fallen into the demonic path. After carefully recalling the history of the current emperor of the Jiang Kingdom, he felt a little relieved. A little girl in her early 20s might not be that bad. They could even work together. "Can you tell me now?" The emperor looked at Jian Wushuang. His eyes were like stars. The answer he wanted was the mysterious willow tree on him. Jian Wushuang knew this very well. It could be said that no other human understood the Wanlu divine tree better than him. Of course, Weiss was not human. "Actually, I don't know much. I've only seen this totem by chance. There are some records on it that this tree is a divine item." Jian Wushuang's words were ambiguous and aroused the other party's interest. In this way, he could know more and gain more bargaining chips. He wasn't trying to fool the other party. But the other party definitely wouldn't believe him if he told the truth. He was now immortal, but he told the other party that the Wanlu divine tree had once appeared in the northern spacetime, a spacetime that was many times larger than this world. Moreover, this Wanlu willow had once come from the starry sky. It was later taken away by a super-existence. If he said this, the other party probably wouldn't believe him. It was even more troublesome to explain. It was better to throw out a simple bait first and let the other party understand that the Wanlu divine tree was very unique and an opportunity. Instead, it would make the other party feel at ease. Sure enough, as he had expected, the little emperor's interest was immediately piqued. "May I ask where you saw this totem?" he asked. "The Great Tang of the East." Jian Wushuang raised his head and said. After hearing this, the emperor of the Jiang Kingdom seemed to have received affirmation in his eyes. Because her mother came from the Tang dynasty. He had long since begun to yearn for it, but he also suspected that the totem on his back was related to his mother, so he naturally thought of the Great Tang. Now that she had received Jian Wushuang's confirmation, she was even more certain. "Sir, can you still find that place?" Jian Wushuang shook his head and replied, "It's an island on the sea. It's hard to find." He didn't say it in a definite manner and gave the other party some expressions that could only be encountered by luck. He had said so much to the little emperor, but he had yet to open his mouth to ask, so he naturally had to hang on. The emperor of Jiang took a deep breath and said respectfully, I know what I want to know. You may ask now, sir. First, don't call me Mr. You can call me Jian Wushuang, senior, or fellow cultivator. Secondly, is the totem on your back something you were born with? Or did it appear for some reason? Thirdly, what's your current realm? Jian Wushuang took the opportunity to ask a lot of questions. He had already figured out that the other party was a little girl who had not been born for a long time. He had to grasp the situation. It would be best if he could not be led by the nose. Actually, these questions were normal. Needless to say, the first one was just to test if the other party had any ulterior motives. The latter two involved some of the other party's secrets. I can answer Senior's question, but please keep it a secret for me, including the fact that I'm a girl. Jian Wushuang nodded and agreed. As long as the other party was not hostile, he would not provoke them for no reason. The totem on my back started to appear after I turned 16. Actually, I didn't always live in the capital. When I was young, I traveled with my mother in the 7 southern nations. When I returned to the capital at 16, I was told that I would inherit the throne. My mother also left me from then on. This totem also appeared on my back. As for my current realm, I'm not too sure either. However, she changed the topic and told him about the cultivation rules of this world. Qi. It was a type of energy that could be condensed. It could not be compared to divine power, but it was still a type of power. The first step, the Qi gathering stage, was also known as the acquired stage. The second step, Qi refinement, could be called Xianxia. After that, he condensed his golden core, and the cyclone was like an ocean. Next was the nascent soul realm. At this level, one was almost invincible in the world. Further up was the illusory divine phase. Heavenly law phenomena, the descent of the divine form, a true immortal Tao technique. Jian Wushuang's expression changed. This was the first time he had heard of the cultivation rules of this world. Could be considered the first step. He tried his best to restrain his excitement and was not even that curious about the Wanlu divine tree. Can I take a look at your cultivation method? He asked tentatively. The emperor of the Jiang kingdom was a little hesitant when he heard that he wanted to see her cultivation method. Jian Wushuang knew that his words might have been a little abrupt. He quickly explained, I'm just curious. Your cultivation method is a little special. There is no stable realm. Perhaps I can tell your current realm from your cultivation method. That's not what I meant. There's nothing to hide about cultivation methods. It's just that I don't know my own cultivation method. Back then, my mother only left me an ordinary cultivation secret manual. If Senior wants to see it, I can get someone to take it. That's good too. Jian Wushuang pretended to feel sorry for her. However, she was already overjoyed. The other party did not know that he did not know the cultivation method. In this way, he did not need to curry favor with Prince Liang and directly embarked on the path of cultivation. This was simply effortless, and he had also dealt with the little emperor of the Jiang kingdom who hid the secret of the Wanlu divine tree. Jian Wushuang suppressed his joy. After waiting for a while, a black-robed figure appeared in the hall and handed a secret book to Jian Wushuang respectfully. Jian Wushuang opened it casually and looked at it casually. In fact, his mind was working quickly and he memorized everything without missing a word. Combined with the cultivation realm mentioned by the emperor of the Jiang kingdom, he quickly deduced that this secret manual could directly lead one to the divine phase. The content above was actually very simple. However, for someone with no cultivation experience, it was like a heavenly book. Even the young emperor of the Jiang kingdom felt the same. She could only understand the content related to the Hotian phase at most. After flipping through the manual, Jian Wushuang casually tossed it onto the table and said calmly, "It is indeed an ordinary secret manual, but the contents are enough to cultivate you to the divine phase. It seems your mother was quite a powerful figure." The more he marveled at it, the more it impressed the other person with his abilities. Before my mother left, she told me that if I fully understood this secret manual, I would be able to see her. Does it mean I have to reach the divine phase? The young emperor of the Jiang kingdom had a look of longing in her eyes. After all, when her mother left, she was only 16 years old. She had to handle the mess of the Jiang kingdom all by herself. With your talent, combined with the totem of the Wanlu divine tree, reaching the divine phase is only a matter of time, Jian Wushuang reassured her. In his view, possessing the totem of the Wanlu divine tree meant that reaching the divine phase, or even becoming a universe master, was not a problem. Moreover, the Wanlu totem on the young emperor of Jiang Kingdom was left by her mother, suggesting that her mother likely had connections with the Wanlu divine tree. Jian Wushuang licked his lips. He had formed a plan in his mind. For today, let's leave it at this. If you have any questions about your cultivation, feel free to ask me anytime. Senior, why are you being so kind to me? The young emperor of the Jiang Kingdom asked curiously. She felt that Jian Wushuang was a bit too attentive, or rather too good to her, sharing everything without reservation. Initially, she thought Jian Wushuang was a cunning old fox who would definitely be evasive with her. But the situation turned out to be quite different. Jian Wushuang was taken aback by her question and could only explain. When I saw this totem, a senior once told me that someone bearing this totem is destined to be a chosen one. I guess I'm just trying to secure a powerful ally in advance. He made up a lie casually to cover it up, then wanted to leave directly. Now that he had obtained the cultivation method, he naturally wanted to go back and try it out. He couldn't talk too much with her, or she might discover something suspicious. Thank you, Senior. If I achieve anything in the future, I will not forget your guidance. The young emperor of the Jiang Kingdom expressed her genuine gratitude this time. Jian Wushuang waved his hand and prepared to leave. But just as he turned around, he looked back at the young emperor and asked curiously, "We've talked for so long, but I still don't know your name." He only knew that she was the 16th emperor of the Jiang Kingdom and did not know her real name. Actually, there weren't many people who knew the emperor's real name, so it was normal that he didn't know either. Well, Senior can just call me Jiang Shang. Jiang Shang. Jiang Shang? Hearing this name, Jian Wushuang was stunned for a moment before he reacted. Good, a good name. After speaking, he didn't want to stay there any longer. He held his breath and quickly left the great hall. Following the eunuch, he left the palace and finally exhaled a long breath. How could I forget? She also has the surname Jiang. Jian Wushuang closed his eyes slightly, and after a moment, he boarded the carriage. In an instant, his thoughts pulled him back to the northern spacetime, the Qixin temple of the past, the great Xia dynasty. There was also a little girl who had a connection with the Wanlu divine tree. Her name was Jiang Shang. She was Hui Qing's disciple. There shouldn't be such coincidences in the world. Perhaps this is destiny. Jian Wushuang sighed. The mistake he made back then, he thought it ended with Jiang Shang's fall. Unexpectedly, he encountered another girl with a similar name, also connected to the Wanlu divine tree. He now suspected that she was the reincarnation of Jiang Shang. There couldn't be so many coincidences in the world. Jian Wushuang firmly believed. Returning to his residence, he didn't hurry to tell Xianxia about today's events but instead closed his room door and began to cultivate alone. Hotian Qi gathering. It emphasized sinking the Qi into the Dantian, something he had achieved in the mortal world. This helped him avoid many detours. Qi entered the Dantian, and the next step was to open the meridians. To clear 108 meridians. Once the Qi flowed throughout the body, he could fully master the use of Qi and become a master of innate abilities. At that point, he could attempt to practice Qi cultivation, condensing and elevating the level of Qi, ultimately forming a golden core. The golden core stage was considered the first step of becoming a cultivator, at least enabling him to soar through the air, giving him some means of self-protection. Moreover, only by reaching the golden core stage could one's aura manifest externally. This was why only those at the golden core stage could use magical treasures. In other words, before reaching the golden core stage, he couldn't use a sword. But without a sword, it was a huge loss for Jian Wushuang. It was a real loss of combat power. Without a sword, he couldn't even defeat mortals now. However, the most important thing now was to clear the meridians. With his breath sinking into the Dantian, he began to use Qi to form a vortex to clear the meridians. This process was very painful for a mortal body. Jian Wushuang persisted for almost an entire night and finally cleared the first meridian. With the first experience and the skillful use of qi, he could clear the meridians faster in the future. It's time to find Xianxia. Jian Wushuang stopped at this point. He hadn't forgotten Xianxia. If one achieves wealth, they must not forget their friends. Besides, Xianxia had great potential. His relationship with Xing Luo was worth helping. Now in this world, only the two of them knew each other's backgrounds, so they couldn't just give up. Benefits should be shared, naturally. He walked out of the room, asked a maid, and found Xianxia in the bamboo forest. At that moment, Xianxia was leisurely drinking tea and reading letters from Binhai County. These were delivered by one ear. Seeing Jian Wushuang approaching, he quickly waved and said, "You're just in time. There are a few things to confirm with you. The Langshan County has given us a position that needs us to guard. Let's not talk about that now." Jian Wushuang pressed down the letters and said solemnly, "I have something important to tell you. What could be more important than this?" Xianxia was a little surprised. "I have found the path of cultivation." Upon hearing this, Xianxia held his breath, more excited than he was. This was something the two had dreamed of. "Are you sure we can cultivate? Watch this." Jian Wushuang raised his hand, veins bulging on his arm, and with one hand, he crushed a stone inkstand. This demonstrated the use of some qi, also known as inner strength. It was difficult for ordinary people to achieve this. Xianxia knew it. Seeing it with his own eyes, he was completely convinced and immediately asked about the method of cultivation. Jian Wushuang picked up a brush and wrote down the cultivation method he remembered. However, he only wrote the specifics up to the golden core stage. He had to keep some secrets for himself, to prevent the friendship from breaking halfway. After Xianxia obtained the cultivation technique, he immediately threw everything else to the back of his mind and began to cultivate alone in the bamboo forest. The more he cultivated, the more addicted he became. However, they had clearly lost their powers for less than a year. Perhaps this was the charm of cultivation. Jian Wushuang went to deal with some tricky matters. For example, the Coast Guard. He had originally planned to fake join the Jiang Kingdom and really join the Prince of Liang. But now he could only make it real. After making all the arrangements, Li Mi personally paid a visit. It was about the eldest princess. He had a pretty good understanding of this matter. The eldest princess knew about Zhang Shang's identity as a woman. Moreover, Zhang Shang's mother was not the empress or the consort Bin. She was just an ordinary woman that the emperor of the Jiang Kingdom had met outside. But in Jian Wushuang's eyes, it was not a big deal. The former emperor of the Jiang Kingdom had no other children except for his daughter, Zhang Shang. There was no consort, only an empress on the surface, and it was still a decoration. That was why the throne had fallen into Zhang Shang's hands. If Zhang Shang wasn't a woman, it would be fine. However, she was a woman and was the emperor. Naturally, the eldest princess would be jealous. This explained everything. The only thing he couldn't figure out was that the Jiang Kingdom was in trouble both internally and externally. How could they still have the mood to fight among themselves? Li Mi, an outsider, was even more involved and wanted to kill the eldest princess. Jian Wushuang was even more confused. Li Mi had come today for the eldest princess. He had already laid his cards on the table with Zhang Shang, and the other party still wanted him to help her kill the eldest princess. Then there must be some kind of secret, but he didn't say it before. Now, he had dragged Li Mi over to discuss with him. Inside the secret chamber, the two sat opposite each other. "His Majesty has already told me about your situation. This way, it saves me the trouble of explaining. Let me be direct. The eldest princess is not an ordinary person. Her threat is greater than you think." Li Mi calmly took a sip of tea and told the truth. Jian Wushuang was prepared, but he wasn't too surprised. In the dark room, he couldn't see Li Mi's face clearly. He followed the voice and asked, "To be honest, Zhang Shang is only a few days away from becoming the king of the fallen country. Even if the eldest princess is a threat, could it be that the threat is greater than that of little Liang King? Much better. Little Liang King's strength is actually not as good as His Majesty's. But the eldest princess is different. Or rather, she's not the eldest princess at all. Instead, she's a mountain spirit who killed the original eldest princess and took over her appearance. She came to the capital to cause trouble. Even if the Jiang kingdom is going to perish, we have to kill this scourge. Otherwise, she will attack His Majesty. Li Mi's voice was a little vicious. Mountain spirits and land spirits were actually spiritual creatures. To put it simply, they were similar to demons and ghosts. If this world could cultivate, it was naturally not just the human race who could cultivate. He wasn't too surprised to hear that the other party was a mountain spirit, land spirit. I can agree, but you have to tell me the other party's strength. I haven't recovered yet, so I'm afraid that dealing with this mountain spirit, land spirit. Jian Wushuang had some misgivings. He must have just opened one of his meridians. If he fought with his bare hands, he would not have an advantage even if he fought with Li Mi. The other party probably felt that his sword technique was divine and had great divine powers. If that was the case, then he was overestimating him. In the past, he could even exterminate a mountain god or an earth demon with a single breath, let alone a mountain spirit or an earth spirit. But now, he more or less didn't have that confidence. Li Mi could also tell that he was worried, so he took the initiative to explain. Don't worry, you won't go alone. I've prepared a group of killers. They will cooperate with you. The Princess Royal's actual strength should be on par with His Majesty. If she was very strong, she wouldn't have endured until now. When are we going to do it? Jian Wushuang knew that he couldn't avoid this matter and could only face it. 10 days later, whoosh! Jian Wushuang heaved a sigh of relief. 10 days was enough for him to improve his strength. To be on the safe side, he asked Li Mi to find a sword that he could use. The previous move was still fine against mortals, but it was a little lacking against mountain spirits and land spirits. Li Mi naturally agreed. He sent the other party away. Jian Wushuang began to open his meridians in seclusion. He did not have much time left. The battle situation in Langshan County was also very tragic. The final battle could start at any time. He was still considering whether he should help. 3 days later, Li Mi sent someone to deliver a top-notch mortal divine sword. It was extremely sharp and could cut through steel. Jian Wushuang was quite satisfied with it. He didn't dare to waste any more time. The further one's meridians progressed, the harder it was to open them up. However, he was different. The later it was, the easier it was to clear it. The first one took him a day. The second one only took him 6 hours. It was shortened by 1/3. Towards the end, he opened one meridian every 2 hours. In less than 10 days, he had opened up all the meridians in his body. Inner chi gathered in his body and began to condense into a treasure pill. However, it had yet to take shape. Just by relying on pure cultivation, his speed had also slowed down. Cultivation was inseparable from natural treasures. It was also inseparable from the guidance of a famous teacher. Jian Wushuang didn't lack the guidance of a master teacher, but he couldn't do without treasures. No matter who it was, they were no exception. Xiantian Qi Cultivation. Jian Wushuang held the long sword in his hand and waved it again and again, trying to find some resonance from the aura circulation. 10 slashes in one breath. The only thing missing from a flawless sword technique was strength. In the remaining 2 days, he mastered the sword technique. The 10-day agreement had arrived. However, the time set was to take action at night. At noon, he went to the bamboo forest and told Xianxia about it. After hearing the whole story, Xianxia is somewhat dissatisfied. Brother Wushuang, what are we here for? The cultivation method. Jian Wushuang replied leisurely. That's right. Xianxia slapped his thigh and said, We have already obtained the cultivation method. Why are we still staying? Why are we still taking risks? Let's just run. In his opinion, only a fool would stay. At this moment, he could even abandon his wife and son. In any case, he would not stay. He even went to help the little emperor kill the eldest princess. Most importantly, this eldest princess was a mountain spirit. He did not know the other party's strength or background. There would definitely be risks if they acted rashly. Jian Wushuang listened quietly. He understood Xiangyang's thoughts. From Xiangyang's point of view, They could kick Xianxia aside and run away together. They could go to the Great Tang or any of the 7 southern nations to cultivate in seclusion. When they reached a bottleneck, they could go out and find some sects to continue cultivating until they reached the peak of this world. This was the path they had to take. However, Jian Wushuang was different. He saw the myriad willows divine wood behind Xianxia, and there was a high chance that Xianxia was the reincarnation of Xianxia. It was fate that they had met each other. No matter what, they shouldn't have left just like that. What if the exit had something to do with Xianxia?